Hogwarts, the first capitalist of the magical world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101, Tall and Hard Karl. Looking at Lucius's somewhat excited expression, Karl remained unmoved. He slowly found a sofa in the living room and sat down. He took out a thick stack of books from his ring, placed them on the small table in front of him, and said calmly, "No, hurry, take these things over first. I'll give them half an hour to finish answering the questions. We're talking about what's next." These words made Lucius' brain shrink a little. He quickly walked to the sofa opposite Karl and sat down. I picked up a book on the table and started looking through it, but as soon as I saw the title of the book, my brain became even more confused. Junior High School Mathematics People's Education Press Edition. What the hell is this? I know every word in it, but what on earth is this book about? Facing Lucius's questions, Karl remained calm and spoke calmly. "It's just what it sounds like. It's just some simple math textbooks. As an adult, it takes half an hour to learn one chapter. It shouldn't be a big problem. There are also classroom tests. You can ask your guests to study and do the questions. Those who pass the test can stay, but their share cannot exceed 10%. Those who score above 80 can participate in management, and their share can be increased to 15% accordingly. Those who score above 90 can enter the core decision-making layer and be given 20% of the corresponding share. Those who fail will be kicked out directly. Don't tell me how noble their origins are. I only want an elite team, not a bunch of noble fools." Lucius's head felt like it was going to explode when he heard that. His breathing started to become a little rapid, and he took several deep breaths. Only then did he look at Karl and said as calmly as possible, "Mr. Hohenzollern, isn't this a bit too much? You have to know that it has taken me a lot of time and connections to bring these people together. Even with a lot of money, these families are no longer as prominent as they used to be, but in the British wizarding world, in terms of honor and credit, there is no one better than them. Your plan will be difficult to implement without absolute credit support. Besides, your proposal is simply an insult to them, even if you don't want to accept them into the team. But at least we should ensure mutual experience. These people may not be very capable of doing decent things, but they are very capable of doing bad things." Lucius's persuasion was heartfelt, but Karl remained unmoved and slowly took out another ring from his ring. He pulled out a piece of parchment and pushed it in front of the other person, smiling widely. 48 hours ago, it might have been as you said, but now it's not necessary. I have found a better backer and a better credential." "Impossible," Lucius yelled in a somewhat out of control manner, shaking his head continuously. "There is absolutely no such thing in the British wizarding world. You'll know when you take a look." Facing Lucius's loss of composure, Karl had no intention of blaming him. He just pushed the parchment in front of him again. Lucius was a little impatient. After all, in his inherent impression, such a thing would never happen. So he picked up the parchment impatiently and took a look at it, but it was just a glance, and he instantly stood there again. He stood up suddenly, holding the parchment in his right hand, pointing at the words on it with his left hand, and asked stutteringly, This is true. How is it possible?" As he spoke, he read it carefully several times, and then carefully checked every letter on it. He sat back on the sofa with a dazed look on his face and didn't say a word for a long time. Karl, who was standing aside, deliberately gloated and said, "So, the greatest white wizard in the world, the headmaster of Hogwarts, is this background strong enough? Is this credibility high enough? As Dumbledore's adopted son, I think that should be enough. High enough and hard enough." Lucius nodded quickly, and when he looked up at Karl, he forced an ugly smile and bowed. "Mr. Hohenzollern, he is indeed tall and hard." "What are you talking about?" Hearing such surprised words, Karl interrupted quickly and pointed at the math books and exercises on the table. "Now that your problem has been solved, do as I say. Time is running out." Lucius seemed to have just woken up from a dream. He hurriedly and respectfully handed the parchment back to Karl and picked up the math book and exercises in front of him. He turned around and was about to leave, but just after taking a step, he turned back and said with some embarrassment, "The credit and background issues have been resolved, but what about the funding issue? Compared to Gringotts, without the support of those guys, how could we raise so much money at once? That's a big question." Facing Lucius's second question, Karl's expression was no longer as good as before. His joking smile instantly turned a little cold. But he did not scold the other party directly. Instead, he took out his magical phone and pressed two simple buttons. There was a recording on the phone. "Oh, bro, white boy, our dear boss Karl, the cargo you requested has sailed, a full 15 tons of gold. It will be shipped to London soon. How are you doing in England? The accents of those Englishmen are very strange, aren't they? Is the food bad? Oh my god, if I had to eat fish and chips for half a year, I would rather jump into the Atlantic Ocean and swim back to New York by myself. Come back soon, we all miss you. Let's go to the Red High Heels bar to dance together. Lily, Momo and a large group of girls all miss you, our blonde nightclub prince. Let's do it together." The recording was cut off by Karl. There was still a hint of murderous intent on Karl's cold face. He slowly raised his head and looked at Lucius with a smile on his face. "You heard something?" Lucius couldn't help swallowing, then quickly dug his ears with his hands and asked in a puzzled manner, "What?" "The banquets have been too noisy in recent days, and my spirits have become a little weak, and my hearing has also deteriorated a little. I only heard that there were 15 tons of gold. With these guarantees, I think we will be able to succeed immediately. As for the rest, I don't know anything about it. I don't really eat fish and chips." After saying that, this guy very tactfully walked quickly towards the second floor holding a pile of math books and exercises. Karl was left alone, sitting on the sofa, deleting the call records with a tap of his finger. Then he waited quietly, but less than half an hour, only 10 minutes, Lucius came down from upstairs in a hurry. He walked up to Cole with some embarrassment and handed him the only exercise paper with answers written on it. Then he said somewhat awkwardly, "The situation was not ideal." When those guys heard this, they flew into a rage and left without even reading the book. Only the patriarch of the Rosier family wrote the answer. Strangely enough, I thought he was also an old acquaintance, but I had never heard of him. He knows all this muggle knowledge. Chapter 102, Mr. Renault and the Scapegoat. Hearing this, Karl couldn't help but feel curious. He took the exercise paper from Lucius and took a quick glance at it. Using the memory palace in my brain, I quickly calculated the score of this test paper, which was undoubtedly full marks. Even the last specially set calculus question, the other party had answered it correctly. You have to know that, although calculus and mathematics are only high school knowledge in the big eastern country, this is the UK. Being able to complete trigonometry and geometry in high school is considered a natural saint of British mathematics knowledge. Points such as calculus are only taught in specialized mathematics courses at university. So Karl stood up and prepared to go to the second floor, pulling Lucius with him. "Let's go and meet Mr. Rosier." It seems that some people have been prepared for this, so, accompanied by Lucius, the two came to the second floor of the manor and walked into the study, but there was no one inside. Lucius walked to his desk and pressed a button at the bottom, and the two rows of bookshelves opened towards each other. A secret door appeared in front of the two people, and under his guidance, the two walked through a somewhat complicated passage. Finally, we arrived at the door of a small room. This small room should be built in an inconspicuous corner of the manor. There is no luxurious decoration around, only black wall tiles, and the door of the small room is a heavy piece of cast iron. There appears to be a security spell similar to the one used on the Gringotts vault. Lucius motioned to Karl to wait a moment, then took out his wand from his crutches and placed it on the Malfoy family emblem on the cast iron gate. With a light tap, a green light spread out like a wave, and accompanied by a heavy mechanical turning sound, the heavy door opened from the inside out. Karl followed Lucius into the room, only to find that the entire room was less than 20 square meters. There were no windows around, and all the light came from a chandelier hanging above the three people's heads. There was a square table in the center of the room, and around it were 5 or 6 gorgeous stools. Of course, most of them are now lying on the ground in all directions. Except for one stool. Sitting there was an extremely handsome middle-aged man. That's right, extremely handsome. This was Karl's first impression of this man. His black and white hair was perfectly groomed. A gold-rimmed monocle made his already strong and deep facial features appear even more domineering. Like a Prussian officer, the grey suit is matched with a black tie and trouser legs as straight as blades. If you don't know the other person's identity in advance. Karl thought that the person in front of him was a German junker military aristocrat who had traveled from the 19th century. When Lucius noticed that Cole was starting to look at each other, he quickly walked between the two of them and introduced them to each other with open arms. Please allow me to introduce you. This is Mr. Arnaud Rosier, the patriarch of the British Rothschild family, and this is Mr. Karl Hohenzollern, whom I have often mentioned to you. After Lucius finished his introduction, the middle-aged man named Renault slowly stood up, walked in front of Karl, and stretched out his right hand neatly. Hohenzollern, an ancient and noble surname. I heard that you are German. I wonder if you have the fortitude and decisiveness of a Prussian officer in your blood. This kind of words was already a provocation, but Karl liked it very much and simply shook hands with the other party. He responded with a smile on his face. Of course. I really like people like you. Your words are as sharp as a sword drawn from its sheath. They are clear and crisp, but I have another question that I want to ask you directly. Excuse me. Since we are partners, it would be best if we could resolve the doubts before the formal talks. Renault also responded directly, still so straightforward. Karl didn't mean to beat around the bush and asked directly, how did you answer that test paper? I think no one can answer all the math questions so neatly without advance preparation. This is my doubt. Please answer it. It's no big deal. Renault said simply, pulling back his right hand and slowly sitting back in his seat. He took out the watch, looked at the time, and said simply, before coming here, Mr. Malfoy has already briefly explained to us the plan you proposed, and I have carefully analyzed it. If you want to be in this plan, or not in this plan, and be treated as a fool, you must have some common sense of Muggle mathematics. So I studied ahead of time, and it's that simple. This answer seemed so straightforward and clear that Karl immediately looked at him with new eyes. Since he came to the British wizarding world, he hasn't met anyone who treats him so well in a long time. Just after Arnold finished answering, he took out his gold pocket watch, pointed to the time on it and said, time is running out. It's almost lunchtime. Let's talk about it quickly. We are here to attend a banquet after all. This urging made Lucius a little nervous, fearing that Karl would be unhappy, but Karl did not show any sign of being unhappy. He sat directly opposite Mr. Renault, clasped his hands together and smiled. Since you are in such a hurry, you will lead this meeting. Do you have any questions, Mr. Renault was not vague and asked directly. According to your plan, the first step is to release water and inflate the credit bubble. There is nothing wrong with this step. No one will be unhappy if we give money to these lazy people, but the most important thing is to package their loans into credit investment and lending financial products so as to sell it and transfer the loan relationship. This step will be troublesome. We are not Gringotts or the Ministry of Magic. Without strong credit support, this step will not work. Hearing the other party's question was so professional, Karl was even happier and spoke directly. There is no problem with this step. We have the headmaster of Hogwarts, Mr. Dumbledore, to do our advertising and backstage work. Hearing this, Mr. Renault was a little surprised, but he didn't hesitate too much and continued to ask, very good. I won't ask too much about your relationship with Dumbledore. After the loan is issued, the next thing is to continue to invest funds. What you want to create is a state of financial frenzy that will make all wizards in the British wizarding world. It creates a common belief that this prosperity will continue and the higher returns on investment will continue. In this process, we need a huge amount of funds. It is obviously not enough to rely on the Richel family and the Malfoy family alone. This is the second key point, Karl answered immediately. 15 tons of gold have been shipped to the port of London, and nearly 1,000 tons of gold are being traded on the London International Financial Market. Although I can't guarantee that I can withdraw so much money in a short period of time, but give me some time, the funding problem will definitely be guaranteed. After getting the answer, Mr. Renault nodded slightly and looked at Lucius, who had a strange expression on his face. Asked the third question that the other party had not asked before. After the investment frenzy occurs, how do you plan to burst the bubble? And if this matter cannot be cleaned up, who will take the blame? Wonderful. It's really wonderful. Carol looked at the middle-aged man in front of him and couldn't help but asked in a low voice, you even considered running away and taking the blame? Have you ever been in the underworld? The answer to this question is very simple. Whoever is behind us will take the blame. Only Headmaster Dumbledore can take the blame. Chapter 103 Blockchain Galleons. Very good. It seems that all the primary problems have been solved. Mr. Renault seemed very satisfied with Karl's answer, but it seemed that he had some other questions, so he did not leave his seat, but continued to speak while tapping the table with his hands. Then, there are some more advanced problems. What should we do with those greedy guys in the Ministry of Magic? This kind of thing, giving them a share of the pie, is obviously not going to go smoothly. And what is your real purpose? I can believe that the 15 tons of gold are your personal property, but the continuous capital investment afterwards is all up to you alone. Even if you have been earning as much as you are now since you were born, it is impossible for you to have that kind of wealth at your age. That's wonderful, Mr. Renault. Karl did not just admire in his heart for these questions as he did before. Instead, he clapped and praised, dear Mr. Rosier, since I entered the British wizarding world, I haven't met someone as professional as you for a long time. Your question is very good, and I like it very much. Let Mr. Lucius answer the first half, and I will give you the answer to the second half. Having said that, he looked at Lucius, who had been standing aside, and asked with a smile, okay, Mr. Malfoy, show us some of the real stuff. After all, you are Voldemort's former subordinate. You didn't find any punishment. If you say that there is no profit transfer between you and the magic department, I'm afraid no one will believe it, seeing that the fire actually burned himself. Lucius, a spectator, seemed a little embarrassed. But when he listened to the conversation between Karl and Renault, he felt that he seemed to have insufficient understanding of Karl's plan. The benefits involved may be far beyond his imagination. After hesitating for a long time, he walked to the wall behind the two seats, took out his wand, and gently tapped the cracks in the bricks of the wall a few times. Soon, those solid bricks seemed to retreat like waves, and a small space appeared behind the wall. And inside that space, there were only two dark notebooks. Lucius picked up one carefully and used his wand to change the wall back to its original state until he was sure there was no problem. Then he slowly walked in front of Karl and Mr. Renault, placed the notebook between the two of them, and used magic to make the notebook turn pages automatically. And while the two of them were watching, he slowly explained, but as Mr. Reynolds said, those guys in the Ministry of Magic are just a bunch of greedy termites. Nearly half of the Malfoy family's income over the years has been divided up by these greedy guys. To your newly invented Hearthstone magic cards and new flying brooms. They were not very popular at first, but now these guys have hinted to me more than once, overtly or covertly, that I should distribute the profits as soon as possible. As Lucius spoke, Karl basically finished reading the accounts and then used the memory palace in his brain. After a simple summary, I immediately came to a conclusion. If we follow your account book as a benchmark, that means we have to give them at least 7% before they will cooperate with us. In other words, when the investment first started, the Ministry of Magic took the lead in taking out a portion of the funds and adding them to our financial products. So, as to attract other ordinary wizards to follow suit, and then the Ministry of Magic's money will be returned in full, and the money from other wizards will be divided into 30% and 70%. That's what you mean. Karl's words were so cold that Lucius couldn't help but swallow his saliva, but he still nodded very honestly. Point at the same time added, even with the existing Hearthstone magic cards and the broomstick project, they want to do this. Okay, that's great. Karl clapped his hands vigorously and shook his head happily. Out of a profit of 100 million, they took 70 and gave us 30. Should I thank them? I think those people in the Ministry of Magic are really looking for death. However, after he had lost his temper, Karl's anger seemed to have dissipated a lot, but he said it with no expression of indifference. Okay, no problem. Give it to them. What did you say, Lucius? And Mr. Renault asked the question at the same time, but Karl just spread his hands and spoke, as if nothing had happened. Didn't you two gentlemen hear me? I told them to give it to me. Whether it's 7% or 8%, I'll give it to them. But we just signed an agreement with them. You have to make it clear that what we break down is profits, not cash flow. I thought we were all living on the same land, so I should give them half of the profits, but they were so shameless. Then don't give them a penny and let those ignorant idiots experience the charm of modern accounting. After Karl had finalized the issue of profit distribution for the Ministry of Magic, he turned to look at Mr. Renault. Said calmly, okay, let's stop thinking about those disgusting guys and let me answer your second question. The guarantee of continuous funding is very simple. There has always been an unclear exchange rate between gold galleons and British pounds. Those greedy goblins at Gringotts don't like exchanging pounds, but we can totally accept that. You have to know that in the City of London, hundreds of billions of dollars of offshore funds are emitted in and out of Europe every day. Some of these are shady. We can use the gold galleon as a prop to turn these black money into a blockchain product. We will sell it in the City of London and package it as a financial product. This will not only help them launder money, but also solve our funding problems. After all, we are just borrowing the money. After the flood, we will mainly reap the savings of the British Ministry of Magic over the past hundreds of years, and those greedy goblins in Gringotts, and of course, those idiots who showed up today and left again. After Karl finished speaking, he did not look at the expressions on his two partners' faces, but took out a bottle of sherry from the ring. There were also 3 exquisite crystal wine glasses, which were filled and personally handed to the two of them. Life always needs some rituals. You can slowly digest what I said. After the Christmas holiday is over in a few days, let's officially get started, but before that, I have a suggestion. Let Mr. Renault serve as the new CEO of the company. Mr. Malfoy, who is leading this financial bubble plan, will temporarily resign from his economic duties and join the British Ministry of Magic as soon as possible to pave the way for future plans. Upon hearing this, Lucius was completely dumbfounded. How could he be kicked out of the group he had organized? He took the wine glass, thought for a long time, and finally asked, Mr. Hohenzollern, may I ask why? And what is my main purpose of going to the British Ministry of Magic? I have to explain it. Chapter 104 Job Changes and Memories. It seems that you are not very satisfied with my arrangement, Mr. Malfoy, Karl said lightly, and the hand that was handing over the wine glass stopped in midair. There was still a smile on his face, but there was a hint of anger and coldness in his beautiful blue eyes. Seeing this, Lucius immediately realized that he had just said something stupid and quickly waved his hand to apologize. I'm sorry, Mr. Hohenzollern. I don't think so. I just have some doubts in my heart, and I don't mean anything else. When he said this, Lucius' tone was extremely humble, and he did not sound noble at all. It wasn't because he was a masochist, but he was really scared in his heart. This had to do with his first meeting with Karl. At that time, I just went to North London to buy some things that were not presentable, but I ended up walking on the Muggle Street. I was kidnapped for no apparent reason, and I clearly remembered that my magic seemed to be completely ineffective. The noble lady standing next to Karl had magic skills that he had only seen in one person, and that was Voldemort. He was then taken to an abandoned factory in the suburbs of London. Carol met him with a smile, and the first sentence he said was, "Mr. Lucius Malfoy, it's a great honor. My name is Karl Hohenzollern, and I will soon be going to the British Wizarding World to serve my sentence, or go to school. Before this, I had a great idea to make money, but I had no background, so I hope to find a qualified partner. You are very honored to be chosen by me, so you are kidnapped. Now please answer me, are you willing to cooperate with me?" I still remember that he hesitated for a few seconds, because he had never seen such a scene before. Carol immediately put on a regretful expression, and said with a sigh, "It seems that you still haven't asked the situation clearly. In this case, according to the industry rules of the kidnapping industry, you have seen my true face, so I cannot leave your name behind. I will just let you continue to shine for the British Empire in the sea." As soon as he finished speaking, the confused Lucius was thrown into a huge gasoline barrel by the rude man in black. The mixer at the side poured high standard corrosion resistant cement mixed with various mud, sand, and stones directly into the gasoline barrel. If Lucius hadn't reacted quickly enough, he would have been at a dock in London, quietly serving as a concrete pillar. Therefore, he knew better than anyone else in the British Wizarding World about this angelic and handsome boy who always had a smile on his face. His methods are not much better than Voldemort's before, or rather, his methods are more terrifying and more advanced. He can make other people willingly give all their wealth to him without any complaints. Thinking back on this now, he felt his hair stand on end, but fortunately, Karl didn't seem to blame him. He still had a smile on his face and just placed his glass of wine on the seat where he had sat before. He looked at himself and said slowly, "Don't be nervous. I don't mean to blame you. It's just that I generally hope that my partners or subordinates will be more cautious. You can try to understand the meaning of what I say as spontaneously as possible, instead of requiring me to explain every sentence. But now I'm under your roof after all. I'd like to explain it to you." After saying that, Carol took a sip of the wine in the glass, moistened his throat, then sat back in his seat, crossed his legs and said calmly, "The reason is not that complicated. It's just that this plan requires a higher level of professionalism. I think based on the current comparison, Mr. Renault is obviously more suitable than you, and going to the Ministry of Magic does not mean that you are out of our organization. You will get the same amount of profit as you deserve. I just ask you to open your brain and think carefully. If it's just about making money, why would we go through all this trouble, whether in the Muggle world or anywhere else? A society mainly consists of people. When capital accumulates to a certain level, the purpose of capital cannot be limited to the growth of capital. Capital will inevitably seek to expand its power." Having said that, Karl did not continue speaking. He paused there deliberately, as if waiting for Lucius's answer. Lucius quickly understood the meaning and spoke quickly. "I understand. You want me to enter the British Ministry of Magic and use money as a tool to corrupt or win over some knowledgeable people. Let them provide honest and necessary convenience in our future actions. Compared to Mr. Renault's expertise, I think I have an advantage in communicating with people, and I will do my best to accomplish your goal." "Smart. You are indeed very smart." Hearing this answer, Karl's smile deepened, and he picked up the glass of wine that had been placed on Lucius's seat. He stood up again and handed it to the other party. Lucius was also very tactful and took the glass of wine without too much talk. Mr. Renault also stood up at this time and picked up the drink in front of him. The three of them raised their glasses together, and with a crisp sound, the glasses clinked together tightly. As the leader, Karl also spoke first. "I wish you success. Let us lead the British Wizarding World into the next era. I wish us success." Lucius hurried to follow. Mr. Reynolds followed suit, or maybe there was something odd about his toast. He still spoke slowly with a serious expression. "For a new era, for the greater good." Just like that, after 3 glasses of sherry, this meeting on the economic future of the British Wizarding World came to an abrupt end. Cole was very happy and prepared to leave for lunch, but just before leaving, he seemed to remember something. He pulled Lucius, who was leading the way, and said indifferently, "Oh, by the way, after entering the British Ministry of Magic, your main focus will be on winning over the members of the Wizengamot Parliament." Wizengamot? Lucius asked in a low voice, somewhat puzzled. "That is the criminal court of the British wizarding world. Our plan can only be considered a financial crime at best. Logically speaking, there should be no need for the Wizengamot to judge us, of course." Karl said bluntly, "The laws of the British wizarding world and the regulations on the financial industry are at least 100 years behind those of the Muggle world. No matter how excessive we are, the most we will get is a fine. But that's why I asked you to do this, because I must go there before the summer vacation to stand trial for murder or something like that." Lucius was shocked, and even Mr. Renault stopped, both of them staring at Karl. Karl, however, was as indifferent as ever, patting Lucius on the shoulder and saying, "Don't be so surprised. I won't attack innocent people. I'm not that cruel or perverted. It's just killing someone you're familiar with and bringing a little crisis to this magical world. After all, we can't let those bastards in the Ministry of Magic sit idle all day long. Otherwise, how will they spare time for those who cook the accounts? Then, who is he?" Lucius was still a little worried. After all, his beloved son was still studying at Hogwarts according to Carol. This is going to be a big move. Feeling the other person's concern as a father, Karl patted the other person's shoulder and comforted him. "It's okay, it's just Voldemort. Let's go eat first." As a Hufflepuff, I don't allow myself to be hungry. Chapter 105 Professor Quirrell in action and VOLDEMORT and -039 S collapse. The last day of Christmas holidays in the corner of the corridor of the Hogwarts infirmary, a humanoid figure seemed to be packing something. His figure was mean and hunched, and his movements were as quick and agile as a ghost. His eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets as he stared at the newspapers pasted on the wall. There was murderous intent in his eyes, especially in one of the photos, which showed a handsome blonde boy with a bright and sunny smile. On the boy's forehead, there was a small knife stuck in it, with words like revenge, kill him, torture him to death. It can be seen how deep the resentment is towards the boy in the photo. "Please, don't lie to me. As long as you can help me get revenge, I'm willing to give you everything." Professor Quirrell was talking to himself. At this moment, he was as thin as a skeleton, and it seemed that only a layer of skin was left on his body. His face was sunken, his pupils were bulging, and his strange attire made people who didn't know him from a distance think he was a mummy that had come back to life. He stayed in this dark corner for almost 3 months, and was always in deep self-doubt. During the past 3 months, he ate very little, and just sat in the corner every day, looking at the newspapers reporting on his life on the wall. And Karl's photo, muttering to himself. Even Voldemort behind his head couldn't do anything to him at the same time. That powerful autistic belief made even Voldemort's usual eloquent persuasion completely ineffective. If Voldemort had not kept assuring him that, as long as he cooperated with him to complete his new plan, he would definitely help him get revenge. At that time, he can kill Cole with his own hands. Professor Quirrell will 100% die here due to malnutrition and mental breakdown. After 3 months of psychological counseling, Voldemort felt that he had said all the good things he could say in his life to this piece of trash. If he doesn't come to his senses, he would rather risk his body decaying and kill this waste by force. Seize control of the other person's body. Because with TM's persuasion, Voldemort can ensure that Professor Quirrell does not starve to death. He would definitely go crazy first. Finally today, this loser spoke up and was willing to leave his stinking doghouse. "Don't worry, as long as you cooperate well, I will definitely help you get revenge and bring you endless honor and wealth." Voldemort was still bewitching, but Professor Quirrell was surprisingly tough. He walked quietly while speaking indignantly. "I don't want honor or wealth. I just want to kill that guy. Kill him. I must kill him. Keep your voice down, idiot." At the end of his words, Professor Quirrell was almost shouting, and Voldemort behind him immediately scolded him. Professor Quirrell also seemed to have given up. He stopped and stood where he was, saying indignantly, "What am I afraid of? My name has been forever engraved in the history books of the wizarding world in a disgusting and shameful way. What do I have to be afraid of? Anyone can come and kill me now. I will never resist." This desperate statement made Voldemort realize for the first time what it meant to be the barefooter not afraid of the ones wearing shoes. Seeing that Professor Quirrell was about to collapse again, he could only speak patiently. "Don't give up. You are an outstanding graduate of Ravenclaw. You should understand the power of wisdom and assist me. With the help of the greatest Dark Lord, we will definitely be able to complete the great plan and help you avenge yourself when the day comes when I return. No matter if it's history or anything else, I can help you change it. It will be as if nothing happened. I can do it for sure." Just like that, Voldemort had said all the good things in his life. And he used all his good temper to deal with this damn waste. He coaxed him while walking slowly, just before Voldemort's spirit was about to be broken by Professor Quirrell. The two finally arrived at their destination, Nocturne Alley. Walking on the streets of Fandal Alley, you can smell the pungent smell of medicine all around, mixed with the stench of rotting unknown objects. For the first time, Voldemort felt that the smell was so pleasant. Most of the wizards walking on the street were in a hurry. They all covered their heads with large cloaks and cast some confusion spells on their faces, making it difficult to see their true faces from a distance. But Voldemort always felt something was strange. The atmosphere of the whole street was different from the impression in his mind. Although the previous atmosphere of corruption, tyranny, and viciousness still exists, it has become much weaker. Moreover, the streets seem to have become somewhat lively. Many small vendors that are usually invisible now dare to set up stalls openly on the streets. The people coming and going seemed to have bulging pockets, and the sounds of hawking and bargaining were heard one after another. The situation in the past where there was a robbery every 3 steps and someone could die every 5 steps is no longer seen. If the goods these people were selling were not illegal, Voldemort would have felt that he had come to the wrong place. "We have arrived at the master. What should we do now, Professor?" Quirrell, who was standing at the intersection, asked like a fool. The Voldemort behind him was the one holding his breath, and he really wanted to pry open this guy's head to see if his mind was empty. He really wanted to scold the other party, but thinking of the other party's previous death, he could only speak patiently. "Let's go get the money first." "Oh no, let's get back the fruits of your labor. You didn't go to class, but Hogwarts did not expel you. You are still a professor at Hogwarts, and your salary should be deposited in Gringotts. Let's go get it out. It will be easier to get things done if we have money." "Yes, that's what I deserve." Professor Quirrell quickly agreed. "Hogwarts should compensate me. I was hurt like that, lying in bed for 3 whole months, and no one really cared about me. They all deserve to die, Professor." Quirrell's voice became louder and louder, and coupled with his strange macup, he couldn't help but attract the attention of people around him. Everyone looked at the funny guy in front of them, as if he were a fool. Even Voldemort behind Professor Quirrell's head. They all felt humiliated. They didn't know when, but the Dark Lord who once made British magic tremble, now had thoughts of committing suicide. He really wanted to take the life of this useless person directly, even if his body would decay quickly, but this kind of life now. He really couldn't bear it for even a second. The depressed Voldemort was madly dissing the teaching quality of Ravenclaw College in his mind. A bastard like this could graduate from Ravenclaw House. The intelligence of Ravenclaw is incredible. Fortunately, Professor Quirrell, although he no longer had a face, was not completely shameless. After feeling the strange looks from people around him, he was afraid that the other party would recognize him. After all, he was now somewhat famous in the British wizarding world, even if it was not a good one. So before Voldemort was about to collapse, he turned and walked towards Gringotts. But when he arrived at the door of Gringotts, looking at the scene in front of me, I couldn't help but feel confused. "Master, have we come to the wrong place, or has Gringotts closed down?" Chapter 106. The first savings bank in the magical world. "Turn around, I can't see you again," Voldemort said fiercely. He was really about to collapse. He really wanted to travel back in time and slap himself twice when he was about to possess Professor Quirrell. Professor Quirrell also heard the collapse in Voldemort's words, and only now did he realize who he had been talking to. So he quickly turned around and turned his head towards Gringotts. When Voldemort first saw Gringotts through the turban, He was a little slow to react. Point, you have to know that as the only bank in the British wizarding world, Gringotts is always bustling with people coming and going. On weekdays there was a constant stream of people depositing and withdrawing money, but now the entrance of the building was not only deserted, but also completely empty. Two fairies in uniform stood at the door with their heads hung, looking very listless, and only occasionally looked up. There was also an extremely resentful look looking across the street. Following the gaze of the two goblins, Voldemort failed to react for the second time, and saw a typical modernist American architectural building. I don't know, when it stood opposite Gringotts Bank, and its British style decoration was somewhat old compared to Gringotts. This building is full of modern art, with reflective glass on the exterior and a white reinforced concrete structure. He looked tough and eye-catching, but what was even more surprising was that there were countless wizards standing in line at the door. He didn't know what business was being handled until Voldemort reacted and looked up, only to see it on the outer wall of the second floor of the building. There was a huge gold-plated sign hanging there, which read the First Savings Bank of the Magical World. The gold-plated words were a little dazzling under the reflection of the sunlight. Sir, do you have any business to do? Just when Voldemort's eyes were hurt by the large gold-plated words, a shabby young man, wearing an ill-fitting black suit, walked cautiously behind Professor Quirrell. He patted Professor Quirrell on the shoulder, and said in a flattering manner, "I see you've been standing here for a while. Do you have any business to attend to? If there's anything you don't understand, I can be your guide. We are the first savings bank in the wizarding world. We have just opened for a week. Now we have preferential interest rates for savings or loans. Successful people like you should come to us to handle business." As he spoke, the young man grabbed Professor Quirrell's arm and pulled him towards the bank. Professor Quirrell, whose arm was held, stood there in a daze for a moment, and then followed the other person towards the building in a daze. It was Voldemort behind his head who reacted first and immediately used magic to shout in the other person's mind, "Stop. Now, don't forget our identity. We can't be exposed." This roar in his mind finally made Professor Quirrell react. He spoke hurriedly, while trying to break free from the other party's pull. No, I just plan to go to Gringotts to collect my salary. I have no plans to do any business. Please, let go. Will you please let go, Professor?" Quirrell struggled hard to break free, but the young man didn't seem to want to let go. As he pulled, he spoke with a certain amount of pride. "Salary. It seems that you either work for the Ministry of Magic, or are a professor at Hogwarts. I guess that's correct. Don't worry. Now the salaries of both the Ministry of Magic and Hogwarts have been entrusted to us for distribution and preservation, so you should come to us even more. We can definitely provide the best service for high quality customers like you." Hearing this, Professor Quirrell was a little stunned. He looked blankly at the people queuing around him. My brain seemed unable to process so much information at once. Looking at the various colorful neon signs in Diagon Alley in front of me. There were crowds of people hawking their wares, billboards full of discounts and offers, and all kinds of strange and bizarre merchandise that had never been seen before. He suddenly had a feeling that he had been hiding in Hogwarts for 3 months, and the magical world seemed to have become something he did not recognize. Just when he couldn't make up his mind, Voldemort made the decision for him, and he spoke into the other's mind using magic. "Let's go over there and take a look. We need to understand the current situation." So Professor Quirrell, like a puppet, allowed the young man in front of him to pull him towards the magnificent building. Along the way, Professor Quirrell wanted to keep his identity secret, so he pretended to be deep and said nothing. But the young man was like a chatterbox and kept asking questions. "You are very talented and intelligent. Where do you work? The Ministry of Magic or Hogwarts?" "I think it should be Hogwarts. The treatment at Hogwarts is better. The academy has reformed its salary system now. Every professor will pay 5 social insurances and 2 housing funds. If you apply for a loan, our loan amount can be much higher." Just like that, he kept asking questions, even though Professor Quirrell said nothing, because there were many terms he didn't understand at all. But even so, before reaching the door of the building, the young man actually guessed Professor Quirrell's true identity through this kind of verbal test. So the young man instantly became more respectful and said, rubbing his hands, "So, You are the famous Professor Quirrell. Your great achievements have been known to everyone throughout the Christmas period. The headlines of the newspapers are all about the mysterious Mr. Hohenzollern and the gossip about our beloved headmaster Dumbledore. Your page has been featured in dozens of pages. You are truly well known, and I have long admired your name. As he spoke, the young clerk went straight to Professor Quirrell, whose expression was pale, and whose heart was about to collapse. He bypassed the queue, and went directly to a small room on the second floor of the bank. He first respectfully pulled out a chair for Professor Quirrell. Then he poured the other person a cup of hot cocoa. He was so attentive and considerate that, if you didn't know him, you would have thought he was Professor Quirrell's son. This kind of meticulous and thoughtful service was the first time in the past 3 months that Professor Quirrell felt that someone treated him as a human being. He couldn't help but feel a little moved, and asked as if possessed by a ghost, while sitting in his seat, "You know my story. Why don't you laugh at me? Am I not a ridiculous joke?" Most people would feel uncomfortable hearing this kind of self-destructive tone, but that employee was obviously not an ordinary person. After hearing this, he immediately spoke indignantly. "What kind of talk is that? Only boring people would pay attention to your tragic experience. Normal people with character. We should all focus on your efforts and the results you have achieved. We shouldn't point fingers at your selfless contributions. It's not right and it's not moral." Having said this, the employee deliberately paused and looked around, as if to make sure if there was anyone around. After making sure that there was no one around, he quietly approached Professor Quirrell and spoke in a low voice. "I think that you must have been framed by despicable people for what happened to you, and you are the victim." "I am the victim," Professor Quirrell repeated in a low voice, staring blankly at the young man in front of him. The emotion in his eyes was difficult to describe in words. It was like a person trapped in darkness suddenly saw a ray of warm light. The staff member opposite could even guarantee that if he knelt down right now and proposed to this mummy-like professor, the other party would probably agree directly regardless of gender. The feeling was so strong that Voldemort, who was on the back of Professor Quirrell's head, suddenly felt that something was wrong. "It's over. This idiot is going to be cheated." Chapter 107 Promotion. As Voldemort had expected, the young man's emotions were almost the same. He immediately began to prepare to sell his financial products to Professor Quirrell. But at the beginning he was still very well behaved, and began to rummage through a pile of account books. Voldemort looked very busy, but he had already used magic to share vision with Professor Quirrell. I could clearly see Professor Quirrell's name written on the top book in the pile. It's a pity that this useless piece of shit that he was parasitizing on was totally unaware of it, and instead spoke very considerately. "Don't worry, take your time to look for it. Oh, by the way, I don't know your name yet." "William Thompson," the young man answered without raising his head as he continued to look through the account books. About 3 minutes later, William seemed to suddenly remember something, picked up the first account book, and tapped it briefly. He said, pretending to be a little annoyed, "I'm sorry, Professor Quirrell. I've been so busy lately that I've neglected your time. Please forgive me." These words immediately had two effects. First, they brought him and Professor Quirrell closer together. The second was to arouse Professor Quirrell's curiosity about this bank. Sure enough, this sentence had just been said. Professor Quirrell immediately asked curiously, "Are you busy with your work?" "To be honest, I have been staying in Hogwarts, and I don't know much about what is happening in the outside world. If you can you tell me about it?" "Of course." William nodded immediately, "but let's first help you deal with the issue of your salary." As he spoke, he placed the account book and a passbook in front of Professor Quirrell at the same time, and explained as the other person was flipping through them, "Since you haven't come to collect your salary for 3 months, your salary is 150 gold galleons per month. Add to that the 5 social insurances and 2 housing funds that Hogwarts has recently paid for you, and excluding the necessary insurance costs, this is the total amount you can freely use. The total is 1070 gold galleons. Adding the interest for the past 3 months, the total is now exactly 1120 gold galleons. Do you want to withdraw all of it?" Hearing this, Professor Quirrell was visibly stunned for a moment, and he couldn't help but speed up the process of flipping through the account books. He carefully checked every number in the account book, while William served him attentively. Every question raised by Professor Quirrell was answered promptly. What is this special income? I can't remember what extra income I have, Professor. Quirrell pointed to a line of numbers on the account. This amount of money was only transferred to his account in recent days, a total of 500 gold galleons, and it is precisely because of this amount of money that he now has a savings of more than 1,000 gold galleons. That's what you're talking about, William replied calmly, looking at the line of numbers. This is your patent fee, although you may not want to recall what happened in that class, but half of the patent fee for the constipation spell invented by Mr. Hohenzollern is yours. Would you like me to explain it to you in detail? No, Professor Quirrell interrupted immediately. He didn't want to hear anyone reveal the scars in his heart. But this guy seemed to trust the young man in front of him so much that he thought his tone was too harsh. He was ready to apologize to the other party, but William of course said it didn't matter. It was a heartwarming scene of friendship between the two. Voldemort, who was parasitic on the back of his brain, was suppressing his urge to kill Professor Quirrell every second. Damn it, how many times have I advised him along the way? He is the Dark Lord, and I have used so many nice words that you would never hear in your lifetime. As a result, this guy had not been sitting in this chair for long before he was bribed by a cup of hot cocoa and a few words from the other party. The dignified Dark Lord actually felt like he was blind, and at the same time, an uneasy feeling spread in his heart. He immediately spoke sternly in his mind. Take the money and leave immediately. 1,000 gold galleons are enough. This guy's not a good person. Let's leave here immediately. Who are you to say that about my friend? Professor Quirrell shouted immediately upon hearing this. What did you say? There's no one else here. William, startled by Professor Quirrell's sudden shout, looked around the office and asked with some confusion. Professor Quirrell immediately said somewhat embarrassedly, sorry, I was possessed by a ghost just now. Please continue with your work. I also want to know more about the situation outside. Just like that, Professor Quirrell covered up this embarrassing incident with just a few words only. Voldemort behind his head was still emitting smoke through the thick turban due to shock and rage. But it is true that if a person's heart is dead, then he is truly invincible in this world. Voldemort could only watch as this loser fell into the opponent's trap step by step. The young man named William took out a pile of folders and covered the entire desk. While flipping through various documents, he introduced them excitedly, choosing our first savings bank in the wizarding world will be the wisest choice in your life. We have many services here. For fixed deposits, there is now a preferential interest rate of 5% per year, and for current savings, there is also a preferential interest rate of 1.3% per year. There are also shopping consumer loans, credit mortgages, investment fund options, and a variety of special financial services. By the way, you want to buy a property, for example, a villa by the beautiful Black Sea, so that you can go there for vacation when winter comes. It's said to be very warm there this season. If you want, we have a very favorable loan service here. The interest rate is only 30% if you pay it off in 4.5 years, considering your status as a Hogwarts professor and the patent you hold for magic spells. I can give you a discount. William explained to the other party eloquently, accompanied by their exaggerated body movements and colorful facial expressions. These financial services, which he had never heard of before, made Professor Quirrell feel like a Scottish country bumpkin. It was like going shopping in a big city for the first time. I was completely dazzled by the dazzling array of goods, and William kept persuading me. Now is the opening promotion. All financial services have ongoing discounts. The discounts will only end tomorrow. There are only about 40 hours left until the end, so don't hesitate. Buy early and make money early. If you don't buy, others will make money. Professor Quirrell, an outstanding and successful person like you must be in need of our high quality services. As he spoke, William pretended to be very frightened, deliberately stood up, and walked to the door of the office and looked around in the corridor. Then he returned to his seat and quietly took out a red folder from under his desk. Then he swept all the account books and other documents to the ground. He solemnly placed the red folder in the middle of the desk, then leaned close to Professor Quirrell's ear and spoke in a low voice. "What I did was against bank regulations, but I still have deep sympathy for your situation, so I'm risking being fired to provide you with this. The Financial Development Plan for Successful People in the Magical World, Chapter 108, Investment Plan from Birth to Death." Looking at the red folder in front of me with the cover, made of exquisite calfskin and gold-plated fonts, Professor Quirrell only felt his throat tighten, while Voldemort behind him only felt his scalp tingling. The two people looked at William through a pair of eyes, one as if seeing a long-lost relative, and the other as if seeing a bewitching demon. At this point, Voldemort couldn't care less. He had a deep premonition that once he parasitized this piece of trash, if I open that folder, I definitely won't be able to take away a single gold galleon today, and I might even have to pay a little. But just when he was about to use magic to forcibly take away control of Professor Quirrell's body, an accident happened. He was unable to use his magic. It seemed that his magic was sealed by some force. Through Professor Quirrell's eyes, Voldemort looked around in horror and finally fixed his eyes on the cup of steaming hot cocoa. There must be some kind of magic sealing potion in that cup of hot cocoa, and he wanted to remind Professor Quirrell to leave quickly. But he found that he could no longer use magic to communicate with the other person in his mind. I could only watch helplessly as this fool was bewitched by the other party's words and opened the plan. The content of the plan is very detailed, covering everything from decoration and dressing to housing needs, personal image packaging, and even cosmetic products. The entire plan was made to be extremely luxurious. The fonts used for printing were all Gothic, and the pigments mixed with gold powder made it look golden and sparkling. Even the paper used for printing is mulberry paper imported from Romania. As it is turned over, it always has a special fragrance. Professor Quirrell was completely frozen in place. He had never enjoyed such service before. William on the side tried his best to recommend it to the other party. "Our plan is all-encompassing, and we strive to create it only for the most successful and cutting-edge people in the British wizarding world. It not only includes a wealth of financial planning, but also the creation of a personal image, from small aspects such as hairstyle, clothing, and the purchase of small accessories. In terms of big things, it includes the customization of flying brooms for traveling, travel planning arrangements for vacations, and the selection of houses of all sizes. It really has everything you need. In the entire British wizarding world, only outstanding and successful people like you are worthy of such top-notch service, and you don't have to worry about after-sales issues. Once you sign, we will provide you with a one-on-one private manager. If you don't mind, I can take on this responsibility. You can come to me at any time to ask questions about the contract and other matters." As William's explanation deepened, the plan gradually turned to the back, with various pictures of handsome custom-made wizard robes for men. Beachfront holiday villas, magical adventures in places like the Sahara Desert in Egypt, and a lucrative return on investment. It really has everything. Even the arrangements for funeral arrangements after death are included. William also specifically introduced this point. When every participant in our Successful Person program dies, we will immediately contact all well-known newspapers in the UK and the European wizarding world, publish a professionally written obituary, and arrange a spectacular funeral, all in the style of your choice. Whether it's a traditional wizarding funeral, meaning a funeral in the Muggle world, you can experience it. A happy funeral in sub-Saharan Africa, you can choose between the Polish Slavic Orthodox Rite, the Bavarian Protestant model, or the French Catholic model, and our service is lifelong. After you die, no matter if you have descendants or relatives, when the anniversary of your death comes, we will also publish it in the newspaper as soon as possible, and arrange for someone to go to your tombstone to pray in silence. Professor Quirrell was deeply moved by these heartfelt and touching words. Voldemort, in the back of his head, agreed, looking at the funeral recommendations. Today was the only time he agreed with the project being promoted by the young man named William. Hurry up, hold a funeral, and send this damn thing back to where it belongs. This piece of trash shouldn't be alive in this world. Its existence is the greatest insult to the wizarding community. Voldemort was madly complaining about Professor Quirrell and his mind. Professor Quirrell was deeply attracted by the photos in the plan and the future scenes that William had described for him. He said excitedly without even thinking about it or trying to establish a connection with Voldemort. Thank you so much, Mr. William. You are the only friend I have in the entire British wizarding world after what happened. Really, thank you so much, Professor. Quirrell couldn't help but shed tears when the emotion reached his peak, and William seemed to be very cooperative with him. He slowly stood up, walked to Professor Quirrell's side, patted him on the back, and spoke with an emotional look. Thank you for your trust. To tell you the truth, I have only been working in this bank for 2 weeks, but I don't have any sales results because I just can't bear to deceive those innocent people with lies. You know, I'm an honest person. That's why words no longer mattered, and at this moment, Professor Quirrell was completely unaware that the young man in front of him was comforting him. For some reason, he slapped himself on the back of the head. Now, all he wanted was to help his friend. So he interrupted immediately. Stop talking. Please prepare the contract immediately. I want to sign it now. My friend, I will always believe in you. Hearing this, William wiped the touched tears from the corners of his eyes and tried his best to control, oh no, to force out an awkward smile. He dug out a piece of parchment from the filing cabinet nearby and spread it out in front of Professor Quirrell. And when the other party was about to sign without hesitation, he grabbed the other party's wrist and spoke quite emotionally. Any investment has risks. I have to warn you about this. Please think carefully before making a decision. What are you talking about? Professor Quirrell struggled to break free in dissatisfaction. The other party grabbed his hand and signed his name on the parchment without hesitation. Because the nature of this contract was very important. After signing his name, Professor Quirrell used a knife beside him to cut his thumb. Drop a drop of blood on the name you signed. At the moment when the drop of blood fell on the parchment, Voldemort, who had been slapped hard, felt that his soul seemed to be bound by something. This uneasy feeling lingered in his heart until he and that loser were escorted out of the bank by that guy named William. It still lingers in his mind. After seeing Professor Quirrell off, William returned to his office, took out his wand, waved it lightly, and his appearance changed immediately. The young man with a wretched figure before immediately turned into a spirited boss. Carol put his legs on the desk and snapped his fingers lightly, revealing the white walls surrounding the office. It immediately became transparent. A large group of young people in uniforms surrounded it, trying hard to hold back their laughter and taking notes. Carol stood directly on the desk, opened his arms and shouted loudly, "The demonstration is over. Ladies and gentlemen, now follow me and get to work. Everyone who comes into this building, every penny in their pockets, goes into our pockets, so we can run faster." Carl's words immediately caused applause, but the people around him only applauded for a short while and then went back to their work. He also slowly sat back in his seat, looked outside the office door, crossed his arms and smiled. Well, the show is over. It's your turn, Professor Snape. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109 Professor Snape. Outside the office door, Professor Snape, with an aura of fear around him, strode in. As soon as he stood in the middle of the office, Carol opposite him couldn't help shaking his head and sighing. A feeling of sadness and anger at not fighting back was evident in his words, which made Professor Snape on the opposite side feel quite unhappy. He stared at Carol and asked unceremoniously, "If you have something to say, say it now. I don't feel like hearing you groaning here. I've already given you the potion you wanted. The rest of the matter should have nothing to do with me. We are just partners, right? I don't know when I became your subordinate and helped you do this deception, Mr. Honest Hohenzollern." This standard Slytherin house sarcasm made Carton feel comfortable. This was the Professor Snape he was familiar with. So he quickly sat up straight, put his legs back on the desk, pretended to be serious, and spoke earnestly. "That's natural, dear Professor. I have always respected you very much, but your hairstyle and clothing, don't you need to change it a little? Wasn't the previous wig good enough? Why go back to the original one?" As he spoke, Karl's eyes focused on Professor Snape's greasy hair, looking at the oily surface that was so shiny that even a fly would slip when standing on it. I felt disgusted, but at the same time, I couldn't understand it. Ever since that pleasant potions class, Karl followed the others' inner thoughts and helped Professor Snape change his hairstyle. Professor Snape's appearance is greatly improved with a shiny wig. At one point, it achieved quite good results among the student group, even according to students from Slytherin College. Some girls have special feelings for the handsome Professor Snape, and they even deliberately do wrong things in class. While enduring the venom spray by Professor Snape, he supported his head and looked at the other person with a different look. It turns out that appearance is the greatest magic in the world. As long as you are handsome enough, it doesn't matter how bad your personality is. Maybe it's just a little less attribute interest in the other person's eyes. Perhaps it is for this reason that Professor Snape has been using the hair growth agent he prepared for the past 3 months. If you drink it like drinking water, in just 3 months, your beautiful hair will grow back on your head. It completely destroyed the budding perverted ideas of some girls, but this made Karl very unhappy, as he had very strict requirements for his team. The first step to join the organization is to be pleasing to the eye, a melancholy, love-broken middle-aged handsome wizard. This is what he wants. The professor with a bad temper, sarcastic words, and greasy hair that doesn't wash all day is not what he wants. So no matter what, he must make this stubborn and arrogant guy in front of him change himself willingly today. But before that, he had to talk about business first. So he took out a check from his desk. After filling in the amount of 1,000 gold galleons, he stood up and handed it to Professor Snape personally. But the other party did not take it directly. Professor Snape stared at the check coldly and said in a cold tone, "What we agreed on before was not money. You know what I want. Do you want to default on your debt? How is this possible?" Karl shouted quickly, covering his chest with his hands and pretending to be very heartbroken. He stared at the other person and said painfully, "We have been together for more than 100 days. Why do you still have to make such malicious assumptions about me? Is it in your heart? Am I a despicable person who has fallen into a pile of money, has no morals at all, and only knows how to cheat? This performance is superb. The red eyes and the drop of crystal at the corner of the eye will make anyone who sees it feel guilty. But Professor Snape seemed to no longer belong to the category of human beings, and his eyes were as cold as a poisonous snake. He just looked at Karl quietly, opened his lips and spoke firmly. "That's right." "What?" Karl was confused. Professor Snape repeated it immediately. "I'm right. In my eyes, you are that despicable person who has completely lost himself in the pile of money and has no..." "Stop. Stop. Stop." Karl quickly called out to stop, wiped away the tears from the corners of his eyes, and said with a complicated expression, "There's no need to repeat the adjectives that follow. Regarding the deal between us, I always keep my word, even for someone like Professor Quirrell. If I say I'll give him half of the patent fees, I'll give him half. Nothing will be discounted. You can rest assured about my credit. This money is not for you. I want you to hand it over to your previous owner. After all, how can you get things done without money? If he doesn't do anything, how can I clear myself of my criminal identity?" Hearing this, Professor Snape laughed disdainfully. He looked at Cole with contempt and said softly, "That's true, Mr. Hohenzollern. If I hadn't reminded you, I would have almost forgotten that you came to Hogwarts. You were released on bail, or in other words, you were sent to a juvenile detention center. I hope Hogwarts can educate and reform you so that you can serve your 7-year sentence. You can become a human again, but your current identity, if you don't know, you might think you have become the Minister of Magic of the United Kingdom." Such sarcastic words made Karl very sad, and he corrected it angrily. "It means to reform and become a new person, not to become a human being again. Am I not a human being now? Everything I do now is completely in compliance with the law. no matter where the lawsuit goes, I will be safe and legal. As for the Minister of Magic you mentioned, that position is too low. I have already promised it to someone else. You don't have to think about it for now. Now, go do what you should do." Having said that, Karl handed the check in his hand to the other party again, but Professor Snape remained unmoved. She just raised her nose and stared at him intently, with a gaze that was so cold, just like a poisonous snake hiding in the bushes, staring at him intently. Karl could only hold the check in his hands and raise them. He said he was convinced, and walked back to the desk. After searching carefully, he took the money from the safe at the bottom. He took out a piece of paper, then walked up to Professor Snape with a smile on his face, and handed the paper to him with his right hand. Holding the check in his left hand, he handed it to the other party respectfully, and spoke with a smile. "Cloning a human being, whether she is dead or not, is a serious crime, even in the Muggle world. It's still in the magical world, because your goal is to resurrect the other person, but the moment the cloned body takes shape, a new soul has been born. In a sense, no matter what method you use, you are still considered murder. This kind of serious illegal crime has a price to pay." As he spoke, Karl raised his left hand a little higher, and the smile on his face gradually faded, replaced by the same coldness as Professor Snape. "But fortunately, there are still many people in this world who are willing to do bad things for money, so we don't have to do it ourselves. I can help you do all of this, and even help you avoid punishment, but it all depends on whether you are willing to continue and cooperate with me." Chapter 110 Professor SNAPEN-039 S Mathematical Formula for Communication. "You don't have to perform like this all the time. It's embarrassing, Professor," Snape said calmly, his eyes just glancing at the piece of paper in Karl's right hand. Then he snatched the check from the other person's left hand, turned around on the spot, and prepared to leave. But Karl quickly blocked the other person's way, rubbing his hands and laughing. "How did you see that? Sure enough, I can't hide it from your eyes. Is there any flaw in my performance?" "No," Professor Snape replied simply. "Your performance was impeccable, and the emotional pull was perfect." As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper from his robe and handed it to Karl, pointing to the words on it. "When dealing with you, I can't tell your emotions, so I have come up with a mathematical formula to deal with you. According to this formula, your half showdown threat just now was just a show, so I don't care. That's fine too." Looking at the mathematical formula written on the paper in my hand, it looked like advanced mathematics. Karl was completely numb. He checked it carefully several times, then looked at Professor Snape in disbelief. Asked somewhat cautiously, "Professor Snape, tell me honestly, besides being a professor at Hogwarts, have you done anything else? Tell me, are you a CIA spy or a KGB agent?" "CIA and KGB." Professor Snape was a little confused. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "I have no connection with the two organizations you mentioned, but I did refer to some of their books when deriving this set of formulas. This is all thanks to you. Didn't you buy me a lot of books from the Muggle world and ask me to read more, improve yourself as quickly as possible, and don't hold the organization back just because of those books?" Karl was shocked for the second time, considering that he had asked Hermione to buy those books before. These are all publicly published books, and the books about the CIA and KGB are just entertainment products with a novel nature. I bought it for the other person, just because of the deep teacher-student relationship between him and me, and I wanted to give him some entertainment, so that he wouldn't have to look so grim all day long. As a result, Professor Snape was able to deduce such a set of ideas simply by relying on these publicly published books. A communication formula that allows you to interact with people who have extensive performance experience. Karl now feels helpless and afraid, but also more happy and appreciative. He kept looking Professor Snape up and down, circling around him, with undisguised desire in his eyes. It's like a pervert who has been horny for days seeing a naked beauty. This look made Professor Snape very uncomfortable. He stepped back angrily and put some distance between himself and Karl. He stared at the other person and said coldly, "Please be careful about your behavior, Mr. Hohenzollern. We are just in a cooperative relationship. The look in your eyes, you can go take a closer look at those brainless girls who are obsessed with you or your handsome senior, but please don't look at me like that, or one day, after drinking a glass of pumpkin juice, you might become completely blind. Professor Snape's threat made Karl quite unhappy, and he explained indignantly, "What? Handsome senior? What are you talking about? Cedric and I are just very good friends. As a professor and our elder, how can you make such vulgar and low-level speculations? You are slandering me, do you know that?" "Oh, really?" Professor Snape was also a little confused. Looking at Karl's confident look, he also doubted whether his speculation was wrong. So, under Carol's shocked gaze, he took out another piece of paper full of formulas from his sleeve. Looking at the parameters recorded above, he turned to look at Karl and shook his head. "No, according to the formula I derived, between you and that kid named Cedric, you are definitely not friends. You are too close. You may not have any feelings for him, but, according to the formula, he should be in love with you." No, that's not right." Cole was a little panicked. He quickly walked to Professor Snape and snatched the paper from his hand. He waved his hands quickly. "Mathematical formulas are relatively accurate in inferring the communication between people, but it is difficult to figure out the relationship between people. There must be something wrong with it. You must have miscalculated. That guy doesn't have that kind of idea. If he dares to have that idea, I will never let him go." Professor Snape nodded at first, then shook his head after hearing this anxious explanation. This action made Carol both worried and curious, so he quickly asked, "What do you mean by nodding and then shaking your head?" "Cedric is my comrade in arms. He is a good man with noble qualities. I have more respect for him. We are comrades, fighting for the same ideal together." Hearing this, Professor Snape seemed to suddenly realize something and spoke calmly. "If you follow your explanation, I think it should make sense. Otherwise, based on your performance just now, if we extrapolate from the emotion, it is a manifestation of excessive concern for the other person. But if it is really as you said, then I believe what you say is true." Only then did Karl finally breathe a sigh of relief, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked at Professor Snape out of the corner of his eye. "I was complaining madly in my heart. This bad-tempered science and engineering guy actually had such a capability, and I almost got wrongly accused." At the same time, Karl looked at Professor Snape with a hint of pity, wondering if Professor Snape was young. Be able to pursue honor without being so anxious in order to change the minds of those who once looked down on you. Given Professor Snape's current level, Harry's father may not be able to compete with him. However, time does not allow for assumptions. The most important thing for Karl now is to immediately take the initiative into his own hands. It is very dangerous to let your partners or subordinates take control of you when talking to them. As soon as those beautiful blue eyes turned, Karl immediately thought of a solution. After all, for this outstanding talent in front of him, who is as precise as a machine, his perfect program. There has always been a bug in the underlying code. And as long as there is a vulnerability, it will be much easier to deal with. The first step is to force the other person to change that damn hairstyle. So Karl pretended to be calm, sat back in his office seat, and took out a pink gift box from his ring. After placing it on the empty desk, he called out to Professor Snape, who was about to turn around and leave. "Wait a minute, Professor. Don't leave in such a hurry. There is something you forgot to take. It is a gift from Harry." Chapter 111. Professor Snape volunteers. "The gift Harry gave me?" Professor Snape stopped and spoke in a calm tone, but not as cold as before. Karl keenly captured this point. Sure enough, the trigger word for the underlying bug in Professor Snape's perfect program was Harry. Things happened just as he thought. Professor Snape stopped and slowly turned to look at Karl. The body movements were no longer so coordinated, and the expression on the face became complicated, with a hint of fear in the desire. It's like a father sitting outside the delivery room, waiting for his child's first cry. Seeing that the program had become stuck, Karl immediately prepared to make another effort and increase the voltage to cause the system to crash. So he patted the surface of the gift box and said with a smile, "Yes, it's for you. Originally, this gift should have been given to you on Christmas Eve, but you know, you have always been introverted and not good at talking in the college, and your communication with students is also limited to good educational communication. So, out of respect for you, Harry didn't know your home address, so he left the gift in the owl dormitory. Fortunately, another Professor Snape has taken charge of the entire owl dormitory, so this thing has fallen into my hands. After saying that, Cole waved his hand gently and used the levitation spell that he had already mastered by heart to hand the gift to Professor Snape. Professor Snape took the gift with both hands. He looked at the pink wrapping paper on the gift. His expression kept changing, but he never opened it. "Don't you like it?" Seeing this, Karl immediately asked with a sly smile. "It doesn't matter if you don't like it. Just give it back to me, and I'll help you return it." These words finally brought Professor Snape back to his senses from his complicated memories, and he glared at the other party angrily. He carefully unwrapped the gift in front of him. His movements were so careful that it didn't look like he was unwrapping a gift at all. It was more like he was preparing some complicated potion, and he even flattened the surface of the gift wrapping paper in order to avoid wrinkles. His technique was so delicate and gentle that it would be shocking if the students who were criticized by him every day saw it. There is a high possibility that he would hang himself on the spot due to the huge psychological gap. It took about 2 minutes before the gift was unwrapped and Professor Snape saw what was inside. His face suddenly darkened. He stared at Carol and said in a low voice, "This is not funny, Mr. Hohenzollern. Please don't do this kind of boring prank again." Inside the gift box was an exquisitely tailor-made suit and even small accessories such as cufflinks, brooches and ties. Looking at the exquisite craftsmanship and valuable fabrics, Professor Snape had to use his toes to think. He knew that this couldn't be a gift from Harry, but Karl, who was behind the desk, kept waving his hands. "Calm down, Professor Snape. I'm not kidding you. This is indeed a gift from Harry to you, and of course there's a part of me too. It shouldn't be a problem for two people to share a gift. His gift is at the bottom. You can find it yourself." Hearing this, Professor Snape suppressed his anger, took out the suit from the gift box, and then stood there in a daze. Under the exquisite suit was a rough handmade wool scarf, woven entirely with brown wool. There are also two simple cartoon patterns woven on it, a cute boy, girl, wearing glasses, and an angry middle-aged man with long hair. Looking at this scarf, which could no longer be described as rough and simple, Professor Snape's usually gloomy and pale face changed. It was immediately replaced by a flush of blood. Karl, who was sitting opposite him, knew that the bug had been triggered and that he could now change the program. So he continued with a smile, "Don't worry, this is not the entire gift. There is also a greeting card and the other part is blessing to you. Take a good look at it. You just treated my gift so roughly. I'm very sad. You'd better not ask anything from me later." Professor Snape, whose procedures were already in chaos, still had an instinctive reaction to Karl's words. He curled his lips in disdain and snorted coldly, "I don't like your gift. I can answer you right now, Mr. Hohenzollern. You really enjoy this kind of obedience test, but I need to emphasize that we are just partners. I'm not your subordinate, so please don't do such boring things in the future. As for asking you to do something, I think in this life, Professor Snape's words were stuck, just as Karl expected, when he saw the greeting card at the bottom of the gift box and the stick figure drawing next to it. This perfect machine ultimately failed due to an underlying bug. I was completely frozen in place, because Harry wrote on the greeting card in an earnest tone, "Professor Snape, I hope you will like my gift. Mr. Hohenzollern and I selected this gift together." He said, "If that's the case, you're willing to change yourself. I don't know what you've been through, but I really want to say it. Your previous hairstyle was really ugly. It's really a bit ugly." This short sentence was so devastating that it even harmed Professor Snape, who had performed perfectly just now. He was obviously panicked at this time, especially when he saw the handsome picture of himself with a new hairstyle and wearing a suit outlined with simple lines. He seemed to have completely lost the ability to think, and he was unable to read even a single word on the greeting card. He stood there in a daze, not knowing what he was thinking. But Karl, who was sitting opposite him, smiled as if he had succeeded in his evil plan, and looked at the other person with his face supported by his hands and his head tilted. He felt secretly happy in his heart. You do have a weakness, Professor Snape. It made you speculate about the relationship between Cedric and me with malicious intent. In front of me, no one is allowed to take the initiative. We are the only ones who can teach others. After admiring Professor Snape's helpless look, he emerged from his arms. He took out a membership card of the shop, where he had accompanied Dumbledore to get a Shamit hairstyle, and said helplessly while waving it, "I'm going back to school soon. I don't think I'll have time to go to London and revamp my image. What should I do with my platinum membership card? I've spent so much money, and there are still many packages I haven't enjoyed yet. Taking care of the image is a big deal. They are the best, but in the future, you won't be able to enjoy this kind of service for the time being." These sarcastic words were like pressing the restart button for Professor Snape's stuck machine. With a strange expression on his face, he put away the scarf and the suit that Carol had given him. Then he walked up to Karl and stretched out his right hand decisively. He opened his lips slightly. "Give me, damn." He still refuses to accept it. Such an arrogant and direct action made Karl very unhappy. He stood up slightly and put his head in front of the other party. He deliberately put his ear close to her and asked in a low voice, "I didn't hear you clearly. As a professor and elder, isn't this behavior too rude?" Looking at the little bastard in front of him, his despicable expression and actions, Professor Snape took several deep breaths. He suppressed the urge to kill the other person to the lowest level, then tried hard to force his smile and spoke as calmly as possible. "I need your help, Mr. Hohenzollern. Please give me the card in your hand. Time is running out. Please." Comfortable, so comfortable. When he heard the last word, the smile on Karl's face could no longer be controlled. He solemnly handed the barbershop membership card to Professor Snape and said in a nonchalant tone, "What are you saying? The last word is totally unnecessary. It's really unnecessary. I would have helped you, even if you didn't say it. After all, you are my dear professor, and Harry is also my good friend. I wish you a happy haircut. I sincerely recommend using pink and silver gray. Can have a nice haircut." Chapter 112, The Aged Punk and the Furious Professor McGonagall. Even Professor Snape, who has a strong heart, finds it difficult to accept such a shameless person. He could only try to control his twitching cheeks while tightly grasping the membership card handed to him and smiling. "Of course, our honest, reliable, gentle, and generous Mr. Hohenzollern, who never cheats anyone. You have always been a role model for Hogwarts students. I understand that very well." In this way, the two of them flattered each other in a sarcastic way and smiled at each other slowly. Just when Professor Snape was about to leave, Karl stopped him and whispered something to him. "When we go to help Professor Quirrell and that psychopath, the dark wizard we find for them must be one who has committed a heinous crime. It would be a pity to kill him." Hearing this instruction, Professor Snape asked curiously, "I didn't expect that you still have such a moral bottom line in your heart. Is that so?" Cole was a little curious and then pretended to be suddenly enlightened. "Oh, you misunderstood. It's just that those people will die, and they will die in my hands. I just hope it won't be during the subsequent investigation. There is no unnecessary trouble as to how you find them, deal with them, and at what price you hire them. I think you can handle it on your own." Hearing this, Professor Snape's already ugly face became even uglier. "This kid looks exactly like a certain old B. I always like to assign myself some dirty work. Am I born with a face that is designed to do bad things?" With such doubts, Professor Snape asked his last question, and he asked with a little hope, "What about Professor Quirrell? Although he is a useless waste, his crime does not deserve death. What about his life?" Hearing this question, Carol was really silent for a while. Then he sighed and said, "Dear Professor, everyone's life is a fill-in-the-blank question. We can only continue writing according to the answers we have filled in before. It's never a multiple choice question. We don't have that many options. Some things are destined from the beginning. I think you know better than anyone the price you have to pay to change your fate." After Karl finished speaking, He stood up and prepared to leave, while Professor Snape stood there until the other party walked to the door. I couldn't help but ask again, then, what do you want to do next? Can you tell me the truth? Karl, standing at the gate, spread his hands and spoke frankly. That's not a good question. What am I going to do next? Today is my last day off, so of course I have to go back to school. Don't forget that I'm a student. Enjoy your last day of vacation. I hope I can see a different you tomorrow. After saying this, he waved playfully at Professor Snape, and then with a burst of air, his figure disappeared without a trace. Professor Snape, standing alone in his office, couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Student, what a good student you are. Dumbledore allowed you to enter Hogwarts. Either he is senile or his head is squeezed by the door." After saying this, he packed up all his things at home, made sure the office was clean and tidy, and prepared to leave. He was so careful that he did not forget to close the door when he left, but he closed it with a little more force. It was as if he wanted to use the door to clamp someone's head hard. January 1th, the first day of school after the Christmas holidays. Hogwarts Castle. It was just getting light at 6 in the morning, and Professor McGonagall, who was walking in the corridor, had been working for almost an hour as the de facto administrator of the school. This responsible professor always goes to school after the holidays, arrive at Hogwarts early and check every corner of the school to prevent accidents from happening due to carelessness among students who have just returned from vacation. At the same time, we should also care about those students who stay on campus and are not able to return to their families for the holidays. After walking all the way, Professor McGonagall felt very tired, and the worries in her heart were still lingering. During the Christmas holidays, although she spent most of her time at school, it was only during the few days she went to Diagon Alley. She always felt that the British magical world was different from what she knew, and she couldn't really describe the change. The bustling streets, the colorful products, and the busy crowds of shoppers. All of this looks so beautiful. But she keenly felt that behind all this beauty, there seemed to be some kind of crisis hidden. This sense of crisis kept lingering in her mind, and she really wanted to go to Dumbledore to discuss it, but the old guy was on vacation. Professor McGonagall did not stay in her office like in previous years, but didn't know where to go. Feeling depressed. She had been worrying like this for several days, and today she really couldn't help it when she checked the dormitories of the 4 major colleges. And some regular corridor corners. She decided to go talk to Hagrid. Although the other party doesn't seem to be very good at thinking, sometimes, can't naive people always see the essence of complex things? Professor McGonagall made up her mind and walked across the snow-covered square and along the path towards the Forbidden Forest. Before she could see Hagrid's hut, the sound of a loud motorcycle reached her ears. Professor McGonagall suddenly became angry and strode towards the cabin, shouting as she walked, "Hagrid, you promised me not to tinker with your motorcycle while the students are studying. The noise is just too loud. You have to keep your promise." As she spoke, Professor McGonagall came closer. Just as she was about to give him a good scolding, the scene before her made her stand still for a moment. All I saw was an old man with colorful clouds on his head, riding a handsome pink motorcycle, wearing a maroon long windbreaker with a custom-made vest and trousers. He stopped heroically in front of the door of Hagrid's hut, while Hagrid stood beside him, caressing his lover with his rough big hands, while stroking the motorcycle. He said emotionally, "So handsome, Principal Dumbledore. It's a perfect work of art. The color combination is really tasteful." The old punk rider seemed to enjoy the flattery very much, and he shook his Shamet hairstyle. Said with a smile, "That's right. I picked it specially." Carol said, "The color is not pretty. I think he is the one with no taste, but you have to be careful not to let Minerva find out, or we will both be criticized." "Of course." Hagrid nodded vigorously, and at the same time, began to share in a low voice his experience in using magic to transform motorcycles. It even included some experience in avoiding Professor McGonagall's pursuit, and the two of them were having a lot of fun plotting like this. They were completely unaware that Professor McGonagall was standing right next to them, waiting until the two of them had finished their plot. Professor McGonagall walked over slowly and suddenly spoke loudly, "Albus, you're finally back." What's going on with your hair and your hairstyle? And you, Hagrid, you really disappoint me. The angry lioness was roaring, no matter if it was the half-blood giant as tall as a house, or the Sibber old man who was so arrogant just now. They all lowered their heads and dared not say a word. The criticism lasted for about 10 minutes. Finally, Professor McGonagall could no longer speak, and was also a little angry, so she gave examples in a disappointed manner. Can you two give me some extra attention, especially you, Albus? I'm already worried enough about that little bastard you brought with me. Can't you learn from Severus? Professor McGonagall couldn't say any more, because someone suddenly emerged from the Forbidden Forest. The handsome man was a man she had never seen before. She just looked at his huge hooked nose and asked with some hopelessness, "Severus, is that you?" Chapter 113. The old bee who wanted to pass on the blame and Professor Snape who refused to take the. Professor Snape, who was asked by Professor McGonagall, did not respond, but just nodded silently. His original intention in doing so was just to deal with the matter calmly and avoid provoking Professor McGonagall after any verbal communication. But he overlooked one problem. He had a high ponytail with pink highlights at the ends, a mixture of silver and black, and was wearing a pure black custom-made suit. At this point, he is no longer the greasy and cold image he had before, and is positioned more like a melancholy and cool handsome guy. This action didn't seem like Shinemo was deliberately trying to be cool, rather than being wrong. As expected, this cool action made Professor McGonagall a little angry. She kept waving her fingers, pointing at the three people in front of her and roaring angrily, "You are professors and principals. You are role models for students in school. You are their idols and the goals they should strive to become in the future. But what about you now? Such behavior is not only completely inappropriate, but also extremely bad. You really disappoint me." The angry Professor McGonagall, like a roaring lioness, roared desperately at the three people present. No matter it was Professor Snape, Headmaster Dumbledore, or Hagrid, they all stood there obediently, lowered their heads, and dared not say a word. Professor McGonagall scolded these three naughty children for about 10 minutes during this period. The three of them dared not utter a word until Professor McGonagall stopped scolding. Because of dry mouth. He stared at the three people and asked unhappily, "Okay, don't you have anything to say? Have you realized your mistakes?" As soon as this question was asked, Dumbledore immediately looked at Professor Snape beside him, hoping that the other party was always reliable. You can answer this fatal question and take the blame at the same time. But Professor Snape was obviously unwilling to do so, or he thought that the blame before him was too big for him to bear. After all, it is better than secretly mixing illegal potions and helping Voldemort without telling anyone. It would obviously be much more difficult and dangerous to offend Professor McGonagall at this time. So he and Hagrid all stared at Dumbledore, who was in the middle of the three people, and spoke in their inherent sarcastic tone. "Dear Headmaster, I think among the three of us, you have the biggest problem, the highest status, and the oldest age. I think you should explain your ridiculous behavior to Professor McGonagall as a representative. As for me, I can assure you that this is only a change of appearance and is in accordance with the wishes of my lovely students." Dumbledore's old face was full of question marks. He looked at Professor Snape in surprise, and his open mouth best represented his mood at this moment. Well, Severus Snape, you, a guy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, have also betrayed the revolution with such a sharp tongue. Why does he always have a bad impression of deja vu? Professor Snape's words happened to remind Professor McGonagall of something, so she stared at Dumbledore with a hawk-like gaze. "By the way, if Severus hadn't reminded me, I would have forgotten that I had something to ask you about the current British wizarding world. How could there be such a big change after just one holiday? What is your relationship with the newly established #1 savings bank in the wizarding world?" "Albus, we are old, and the British wizarding world can no longer afford another upheaval." These words were spoken earnestly, even full of pleading and sadness. Professor McGonagall's mood at this moment was really at its worst. However, her confession did not get the answer she wanted. Dumbledore, who was questioned by her, still had a face full of question marks. He stood there in a daze for a full minute before he asked Professor McGonagall cautiously, "Minerva, wait a minute. I have been staying in the old house with that bastard boy during this holiday. We have been celebrating the holiday peacefully and haven't done anything. Besides, what does the First Reserve Bank have to do with me? Like you said, I'm old now, and I no longer have any desire for money or power." These words were spoken very sincerely, which made Professor McGonagall a little unsure for a moment, and she couldn't help but lower her head and think deeply. But Professor Snape's cheeks were twitching wildly, and he was struggling inside. Among the 4 people at the scene, he was probably the only one who knew the truth. Now he was struggling over whether or not to tell the truth. Or in other words, should we put the blame on this annoying old guy? Just when he was struggling with the little affection he had for Headmaster Dumbledore. Unexpectedly, the old bee's eyes turned, and he immediately changed the subject to the silent Professor McGonagall. "Alright, Minerva, let the Ministry of Magic handle the affairs of the British wizarding world on their own. We are already old. Hogwarts is what we should care about. We can only protect these lovely children. As for other things, there is no need to care about them. Tell me what unusual things happened in the castle during our absence." These words were indeed very effective. After all, to Professor McGonagall, although the British wizarding world was important, it was still far inferior to Hogwarts. The children and the castle were what she cared about most, so she nodded immediately. "You're right, let's put this matter aside for now. Everything is basically normal in the castle, but I feel more and more Professor Quirrell's whereabouts are getting stranger and stranger. Yesterday he secretly left the castle and went to Tumbleweed Alley, and ever since that incident, he has become very strange. Mrs. Pangley from the infirmary has reported this to me several times. In the dead of night, Professor Quirrell would always be in the corner of the corridor, muttering to himself at the wall, or behaving in various strange ways. I think it's because that incident was such a huge blow to him, that he wanted to take revenge on Mr. Hohenzollern, and suspected that he might be colluding with the Dark Wizard in Tumble Alley." "Oh, is that so?" Dumbledore immediately pretended to be thinking, and deliberately looked at Professor Snape. Said intentionally or unintentionally, "It does seem dangerous, but I'm not very familiar with the Dark Wizards in Tumbleweed Alley. Severus, you have experience going there. What do you think about this matter?" "What I see is that you are a big-headed ghost, a disrespectful old man, watching the ball being kicked to you again." At the same time, he seemed to be secretly blamed for something that was about to be put on him. Professor Snape, who had just been struggling with his friendship with Headmaster Dumbledore, could only look at Dumbledore with a half smile. He spoke softly. "Who decided on Professor Quirrell's position as the defense against the dark arts professor? I have submitted applications for this position many times. Who exactly rejected me? Does he have any problems? Shouldn't we get to the root of the problem?" Having said this, Professor Snape deliberately paused and looked at Professor McGonagall, who already had some doubts about Brittle. He spoke calmly. "As for your first question, Professor McGonagall, I think I can answer it. I happened to go to Diagon Alley yesterday. I was buying some rare potion ingredients, and the store owner just happened to give me a promotional poster. I think this poster can answer this question." Chapter 114, The Old Bee Who Takes the Blame. Looking at the poster that Professor Snape took out from the pocket of his luxurious suit. Dumbledore's keen intuition told him that the thing would definitely bring him trouble, and he wanted to stop it. However, he was intimidated by Professor McGonagall's powerful aura. The other party didn't even make a move, but just squinted his eyes through the glass of his glasses with a cold stare. Dumbledore, who was ready to make a move, and Hagrid, who was curious, "Did I tell you to move? Stand still and reflect on your actions." A look and a few words completely ended Dumbledore's efforts to save himself. He could only watch Professor McGonagall open the poster. Then, as he continued reading, his expression became more and more gloomy and terrifying, like a volcano that had been filled to the limit and was about to erupt. Okay, that's great." The expected anger did not come. Professor McGonagall just shook her head and smiled at herself. But Dumbledore, who was standing by, was a little frightened by the laughter. He knew that this was the calm before the volcanic eruption point, so he quickly explained, "Let me explain, Minerva. I really don't know anything." Before he could finish his explanation, the poster was thrown in his old face. Professor McGonagall threw the poster in her hand directly into Dumbledore's face. Said with a hint of resentment, "Albus, what else do you want to say? You are too indulgent to that child. I don't know the child's past, but I can also guess that he must have some relationship with you. But if you do this now, it will bring disaster to Hogwarts and the entire British wizarding world. Do you know what the consequences are, Professor?" McGonagall's questioning was so loud that Dumbledore couldn't help but panic. He quickly picked up the poster that had fallen on the ground. I began to look at it carefully, and the more I looked, the darker and gloomier his expression became. Just like Professor McGonagall's, this poster is not so much a piece of paper as it is a very thin magic display screen with a video playing on it. The video begins with a man and a woman in business attire standing on either side. The man has his arms crossed over his chest, while the woman has her hands crossed on her abdomen. They all wear the same black business suit with a white shirt, which gives people a professional feeling at first glance. After the two teams finished lining up, a handsome young man with blonde hair appeared in front of the team. With a sunny smile on his face, giving people a very strong sense of intimacy. He opened his arms and began to introduce the business of the first savings bank in the magical world. Those businesses were diverse, many of which Dumbledore had never heard of, including small loans, time savings, current savings, and discount exchanges and so on. At the end of the video, the blonde boy said in a friendly tone, "Every penny you save can bring you benefits, and every penny you save can change the world. Welcome to Choose a Service, the best choice, only for the most special you." Endorsed by Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts and the greatest white wizard of this century. It's you who makes the next choice. At the end of the video, there is a series of scrolling photos, all of which are photos of Karl and himself. That's what the photos cover, which is extremely rich, including intimate shopping and cooking dinner together. Seeing this, Dumbledore's temple began to throb involuntarily. He now began to understand why this bastard boy, when he takes himself shopping, he insists on asking someone to take so many photos of himself and him. Also, why would the other party ask me to sign a formal adoption agreement instead of doing anything to set a trap? The whole holiday was filled with family-like interactions, and it was more about experiencing family affection than being this jerk. It is better to say that it is to compensate myself in advance, to compensate myself for having fallen into a huge pit. Is there anything else you want to say? I never imagined that at your age you would risk your own reputation and the reputation of Hogwarts. You are such a disappointment to me. Headmaster Dumbledore, looking at Dumbledore, who was standing stiffly in place, Professor McGonagall said angrily. After saying this, the lady, who was full of affection for Hogwarts, wiped the tears from her eyes, turned around and left. Without giving Dumbledore any chance to explain, Hagrid stood behind Dumbledore and looked at Professor McGonagall's back. He wanted to speak several times, but had to swallow his words back. Then he looked at Dumbledore and spoke with some embarrassment, after hesitating for a long time. "Principal, although I think Mr. Hohenzollern likes to do some business, there is no big problem. Young people like wealth, which is not a bad pursuit, but you indulge the other party in this way and even help the other party do so. This will be a great damage to the reputation of Hogwarts, including your reputation. If you are really short of money, you can talk to me. Recently, I have been working with Mr. Hohenzollern, the Forbidden Forest magical animal sanctuary he founded. It's already profitable, and I can help you." Hagrid's sincere words moved Dumbledore, but also left him speechless. He looked at Hagrid behind him in astonishment, and wanted to ask him directly. What is that Forbidden Forest sanctuary for magical creatures? How come I don't know anything about it? It seems that in the entire Hogwarts, I'm the most unfamiliar acquaintance. I don't know anything that I should know, and shouldn't know. But even so, Dumbledore was still very grateful to Hagrid. After all, the other party was still willing to believe in him, which was very rare. But just when he was about to respond to Hagrid, Professor Snape, who had been watching the show on the side, snorted disdainfully. No, our dear Headmaster Dumbledore. Why would I need your help with just a little money? What he's wearing, what's dyed in his hair, and even that motorcycle you just kept praising, are all worth a lot of money. It's worth tens of thousands of gold galleons at least. If our headmaster has thought it through and just wants to earn some pension before retiring, there's no need to make a fuss. Such sarcastic words immediately angered Hagrid, who was innocent by nature, and Hagrid had never liked Professor Snape. He always thought that the other party was too protective and had bad character, and always liked to bully the little wizards of Gryffindor, so he immediately retorted, "Why do you say that about Headmaster Dumbledore? I believe the headmaster would not have such vulgar thoughts." As he spoke, he looked Professor Snape up and down again, as if he had discovered something, and immediately pointed at him and spoke. "By the way, what are you wearing, and how you look now? How do you know all this? Did you frame Principal Baddow?" False accusation. Professor Snape smiled coldly, and the look he gave Dumbledore and Hagrid became increasingly unfriendly. Especially Dumbledore. It was all because of this old guy who assigned all those dirty and tiring tasks to himself, which made him look so bad in the eyes of other people in Hogwarts. He is not a good person at all, and it is rare for him to have the opportunity to put the blame on others, coupled with Dumbledore's previous attempt to put the blame on himself. Professor Snape is now truly heartbroken. Since you want to put the blame on the other party, you have to make it a solid case, and do it to the extreme. Professor Snape spoke bluntly. "How do I know? It's simple. Because of the suit and even the hairstyle on my head. I bought all of them and received services from the same store as our dear principal. Of course I know the prices, and who is actually paying for these bills." After saying this, he deliberately looked at Dumbledore and spoke coldly. "Why conceal it on purpose? It's not something to be ashamed of. Mr. Hohenzollern is your student and now your ward and adopted son. Accept his gift. No one can criticize you, dear principal." After saying this, Professor Snape turned around and left in a cool manner, leaving only Headmaster Dumbledore, who was speechless, and Hagrid, who was stunned, standing there. After a long time, Hagrid looked at Dumbledore, his huge eyes turned red, and after holding it in for a long time, he suddenly roared loudly, "You disappoint me so much, Headmaster Dumbledore." After saying this, the tall half-giant wiped his tears and ran towards his hut. Only Dumbledore was left, looking at the other person's back, disheveled in the wind. After suffering 3 consecutive blows, Dumbledore was so angry that he didn't even use magic to change his image. He walked towards the castle angrily. Along the way, countless little wizards looked at the unique principal in the image and were stunned. Not long after, Dumbledore arrived at the door of Cowl's dormitory. Just as he was about to push the door open, he heard a strange sound coming from inside. "You hurt me, Karl. Can you be gentler?" "Shut up, you're being too loud." Chapter 115. Carol the Rebellious Son. Dumbledore was standing outside the door, listening to the sound coming from inside, and his brain seemed to move 10,000 light years in an instant. Perhaps he had never thought about more in his life than in these 2 short seconds. The previous angry and unstoppable momentum was immediately replaced by hesitation and helplessness. I paced back and forth at the door, listening to the unbearable noise inside. Sometimes showing great anger, and sometimes seeming a little helpless. There was also a brief moment when I seemed to have accepted it all, as if it was supposed to be this way, but I didn't expect this day to come so early. As he was hesitating, the noise inside became more and more excessive, and he could only hear Carol speaking loudly. "You've gained too much weight. Take off your clothes first. Let's start over. It looks like we are going to need some props." As soon as he heard the word props, Dumbledore's face suddenly changed, and he shouted loudly, "Stop, you are still young, you can't." Before he could finish his words, Dumbledore, who rushed into Karl's dormitory, was stunned. Only Karl and Cedric was seen, each wearing a gorgeous suit, standing opposite each other, and looking at Dumbledore, who suddenly broke in. Their eyes were full of confusion, and the 2 people didn't seem to do anything strange. The dresses they wore were dark brown, the representative color of Hufflepuff House. It is well trimmed and the overall style is based on a men's tuxedo, with a few cuts to make it look less formal and more youthful. The cuffs and collar of the clothes have large areas of silver sequins, which serve as special decorations like medieval armor. However, the most distinctive feature is that on the left shoulders of both of them there is a cloak that seems to be woven from pure gold, shining brightly. Is there anything I can do for you, Principal? Karl asked with some confusion, looking at Dumbledore, who was standing there in a daze. Dumbledore was speechless and embarrassed when asked, not knowing how to start. Cedric, on the other hand, walked quickly to Dumbledore, as if he had seen a savior, and said while gasping for breath, Principal, you are finally here. Please teach Mr. Hohenzollern a lesson. He is being too unreasonable. I'm a Hufflepuff. I ate well during the holidays and gained a little weight. What's wrong with that? He actually asked me to diet and lose weight these few days and keep in shape. I have never heard such a crazy request. Shut up, seeing Cedric crying and complaining to Dumbledore, Karl just yelled. Then he pounced over, pushed the man to the ground, and stared at the collar that could not be buttoned up. He said angrily, how dare you quibble? You are the spokesperson for my Newton Broomstick Company. We have a contract. You have to keep up your image at all times. You can't even wear the clothes I made for you, and you still dare to make excuses. Starting tonight, you are not allowed to drink any high-calorie honey pumpkin juice. Replace it all with bitter melon juice, and starting today, you will move into my dormitory to prevent you from sneaking into the kitchen to steal food in the middle of the night. No. Two voices of objection were shouted at the same time by two people, and Cedric was pressed to the ground by Karl. Maybe it was simply for his own core power as Hufflepuff, while Dumbledore on the other team just watched silently. The two big boys were lying on the ground, wrestling with each other and interlocking their fingers. Even though the two of them were looking at each other with eyes filled with rage, Dumbledore was just a bystander. But the more he looked at it, the more he felt something was wrong. He coughed lightly to clear his throat, then waved his hand and used magic to separate the two. Then he looked at Carol and spoke in the tone of an elder. The school has school rules that students cannot change dormitories without permission. What you did is a violation of the school rules. Carol simply disdained such remarks. He snorted coldly and lay back. He lay on the sofa beside him in a lazy yet arrogant posture, staring at Dumbledore, and spoke softly. Dear Principal, why did you break into a student's private dormitory for no reason? And I want to ask a question. The way you looked at me and Senior Cedric just now seemed a little strange. What's strange about that? Dumbledore felt a little guilty. Karl caught this immediately and said with displeasure, there's something vulgar about it, which makes people feel uncomfortable and makes us feel like we are doing something shameful. It's just a classmate helping to sort out the clothes. It's all because that guy ate too much and got too fat. He can't even button his collar. Dumbledore, who was exposed, felt even more guilty at this moment, with cold sweat streaming down his forehead. This made Cedric, who was standing by, think that the other person was sick, and he asked with concern, Principal, why are you sweating so much? Are you sick? Maybe you have a cold or something like that. There are herbs growing in the common room. I'll go pick some for you now. After saying this, he was about to turn around and leave. Dumbledore was deeply moved by such caring and sincere words at the same time. He squinted his eyes and looked at Carol, who was lying there, his eyes full of resentment, as if saying, look at them. They should know how to respect the old and love the young. They might as well adopt a piece of barbecued pork instead of you. Carol just rolled his eyes at the other person and ignored him, while pointing at Cedric's back and shouting, stop right there. Don't think of taking this opportunity to run away. This old man is so old, how could he be sick? You underestimate our great principal. Hearing this, Dumbledore immediately straightened up, a satisfied expression on his face, and the look he gave Karl seemed to change his meaning. It turns out you can talk, say more, but he obviously misunderstood the situation, because what Karl said next was like a knife stabbing into his heart. The bastard said mercilessly, if he continues to eat sugar for a few more years, He may die suddenly due to severe diabetes and heart problems. Hogwarts will be mine then. As he spoke, he deliberately turned to look at Dumbledore and gave him a warm smile. Don't worry, when the day comes for your burial, I will definitely give you the most splendid funeral in the entire magical world, and use 10 tons of candy to create a perfect grave for you. Hearing this, Dumbledore put one hand on his chest and his body was shaking, as if he might die at any time. Seeing this, Cedric, who was standing by, didn't dare to run away anymore and quickly ran to Dumbledore to support him. I was afraid that something might happen to the other party. If the principal accidentally died suddenly in this dormitory, it would be a big joke. He hasn't graduated yet, and as for what happens after graduation, it's none of his business. Just like that, the dormitory finally remained quiet for a minute until Dumbledore's condition improved. Carol then asked casually, "Tell me, what are you doing here? I can tell you anything you want to know. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 116, Karl, the Deceitful Father. After Karl's reminder, I felt embarrassed when I pushed the door open at first, and was almost heartbroken by the other party's words. Dumbledore, whose emotions were fluctuating greatly, suddenly felt that he was indeed old, and that he had been too kind to this little bastard. Why should I explain so much? I came here to ask for an explanation, but I was led into a trap by the other party with just a few words. This feeling of being completely controlled was felt again by the old man half a century later. This feeling was very bad, so he, who had almost died suddenly just now, immediately vented his anger. He pointed his finger at Karl and asked loudly, "By the way, you dare to say that any deception by a child is unforgivable? How could you deceive an old man, using my name to run your business? My personal reputation is of course insignificant, but for the honor of Hogwarts, this is a huge loss. You must stop this behavior immediately." Faced with this well-reasoned questioning, Karl seemed to take it completely lightly. He just squinted his eyes calmly, looked at the furious old man in front of him, thought for a moment, and then spoke in a low voice. "You came to me for something so important. Why didn't you tell me earlier? How could I not answer you? But before I answer this question, I want to make one thing clear. You want me to help Hogwarts restore its reputation, or to help you personally? Is this important?" Dumbledore was a little confused, and his heart skipped a beat. Because every time this bastard boy shows this half smile, I always get cheated. His keen intuition told him that what was going to happen next would definitely not be good. Before he could open his mouth, Cedric, who was standing beside him, was attracted by the conversation between the two and asked curiously, "Then, what are you going to do? If it's about the reputation of Hogwarts, it's very easy." Karl shook his finger, looking confident, and then pointed at Dumbledore. "As long as Principal Dumbledore resigns as the headmaster of Hogwarts, all this will have nothing to do with Hogwarts. I'll find a few random people to write a few articles in the Daily Prophet, saying that Headmaster Dumbledore is poor in his old age and obsessed with money, or rather, it reveals his true nature. He wants to make a fortune by relying on his reputation at the end of his life. After these gossips draw attention away, I guarantee that the reputation of the school will not be affected in any way." Sure enough, after listening to this bastard saying such heartless words with an expressionless face, Dumbledore covered his chest with his hands for the second time. I was so angry that I couldn't utter a word. At the same time, it was not until this moment that he began to doubt whether his idea of bringing Karl into Hogwarts was really due to his head being squeezed by the door. After thinking it over, he could only direct all his resentment toward a person whose name he could not reveal. It's all that guy's fault. It must be his genes that are at work. Otherwise, with my own genes, I would never have had such a rebellious child. And just when the headmaster of Hogwarts was about to die of a stroke due to excessive anger and sadness, a cry, like the sunshine in winter, shone into the old man's sad heart. Only Cedric came out and denied it. No, Headmaster Dumbledore must not leave Hogwarts, and Hogwarts cannot lose Headmaster Dumbledore. These words were spoken so firmly, and coupled with Cedric's expression, Dumbledore, who was standing by, felt warm in his heart, just by looking at them. Karl, who was sitting opposite the two of them, just looked at Cedric strangely, then rolled his eyes and spoke casually. Of course, without the diploma signed by the greatest white wizard of this century, something is missing after all, but don't worry, I can make special arrangements for you. Even if the other party resigns, I can still issue your diploma. Really? Then I feel relieved. Karl's acting was so good that his words sounded like casual chat. It also made Cedric, who was innocent and kind, speak out his true feelings instantly. After saying that, Dumbledore couldn't help but clench his hands while touching his chest. His heart, which had just been warm, now felt like it had fallen into an ice cellar. It was not until this moment that Cedric finally reacted and waved his hand at Dumbledore. No, that's not what I meant, Principal. Please don't misunderstand me. I really, but, at this moment, how could Cedric, who was not good at speaking, explain what he had just said? He stuttered for a long time, but couldn't finish a sentence. Karl, who was standing by, couldn't stand it anymore and interrupted. Well, there's nothing to do all day long, so there's no need to talk about that. As he spoke, he took out his wand and waved it lightly. A notebook immediately flew from the desk behind him to the two men. It floated in the air and automatically turned the pages. As the two watched, Karl explained, "Look carefully, this is an official document from the Magic First Savings Bank, or a contract. It contains detailed records of how the funds earned from the cooperation with Headmaster Dumbledore will be distributed. In simple terms, all the profits obtained by Headmaster Dumbledore will be donated to Hogwarts free of charge, thus forming a foundation. Based on this foundation, the annual proceeds will regularly replace old teaching equipment for our school and provide scholarships for outstanding students." Having said that, Carol also stood up from the sofa, staring at the two stunned people unhappily, and he first walked in front of Cedric. He simply reached out and slapped the other person's head hard, then pointed to the side, and Cedric was hit. He could only stand aside with a pout. Then Cole walked to Dumbledore and spoke in a semi-seductive voice. What a great move. At the end of his career and even his life, he still did not forget to burn himself. He made his last contribution to the school he loved so much, and he will be burdened with many unnecessary rumors and malicious speculations. I remain unmoved. That ardent love will always belong to Hogwarts." These words were said with such emotion that even Dumbledore, who was clearly being tricked, couldn't help but feel a little moved. But after being moved, he quickly came to his senses, looked at Carol with some reproach and asked, "Since you already had a plan, why didn't you inform me in advance? Do you think I'm a petty, vindictive, and unreasonable person?" These words were said very sincerely, and Karl almost nodded in agreement automatically, but his reaction speed was obviously a level faster than Cedric's. He quickly pretended to be surprised and looked at the other party and asked deliberately, "That's not right. This document has your signature. I handed it to your office a long time ago. Put it at the end of the candy list I gave you. I think you were too busy with your work to notice it. It can't be that our beloved principal was so busy looking at those beautiful candy pictures that he hastily signed such an important document." Karl looked at Dumbledore and gave him a warm smile, while Dumbledore's cheeks twitched wildly. He was silent for a long time before he squeezed out two words from between his teeth. "Of course." Finally, in an atmosphere of kindness and friendship, the misunderstanding between the two sides was resolved, and Dumbledore was ready to leave. He was afraid that, if he stayed any longer, he might inexplicably sell his soul to this kid, but before leaving, he urged anxiously, "Since you have a plan, implement it quickly, and don't hurt the honor of Hogwarts." But Karl disagreed and waved his hand. "I know what's going on, but it's not the right time yet." Then, "How long do we have to wait?" Dumbledore said anxiously. Of course I will wait until your reputation is completely ruined. Without a reversal, how can there be a sensational effect? Without a sensational effect, how can I make money? A gentle smile hung on Karl's face. He looked at Dumbledore, who looked like he had lost all hope in life, and said with a shrug, if I don't make money, how can I establish the school's foundation? Everything is for Hogwarts, don't you think? Dear Headmaster. Chapter 117 Tulips on the Windowsill. Looking at Dumbledore's shaky back that was gradually moving away, Cedric had a feeling that the headmaster might fall apart in the next second. Point being kind-hearted, he couldn't help but want to go over and help, but was blocked by a hand. He is him and you are you. Don't even think about running away now, Carol. Said this coldly, his words were so hurtful that he didn't believe in himself. Cedric was immediately unhappy. He turned his head and stared at Karl beside him and said angrily, what are you talking about? How can you treat the principal like this? No matter from the perspective of age or anything else, we should respect him instead of taking advantage of him. These words were spoken sincerely, but Karl didn't take them seriously at all. He chuckled and shook his head, then stretched out a finger with his right hand and touched Cedric's white forehead. What on earth are you thinking about? You are quite smart in study, but why are you so stupid when it comes to dealing with interpersonal relationships? It seems so stupid. The greatest white wizard of this century, the one that even Voldemort fears. What can I force him to do? Whether it's his hairstyle or my plans, it's just going with the flow. It's the most important thing in life. You just need to know your own position and don't think too highly of yourself. There is no real savior in this world. It's just a matter of socializing. Then, why is Headmaster Dumbledore here? Cedric was obviously unconvinced and slapped away Karl's hand that was pointing at his head and continued to speak angrily. Carol seemed too lazy to talk nonsense with the other party. He grabbed the other party's unbuttoned collar and pulled him into his dormitory. Then he pushed the other person directly on the chest, pushed him down on the sofa behind him, and looked down at him. Under Cedric's shocked gaze, the evil hands went straight to his chest. No matter how he resisted, in the end, he could only accept the fact reluctantly and looked at the ceiling above his head with pale and weak eyes. Carol took the obviously ill-fitting dress jacket on the other person and waved it gently. After putting everything away neatly, he kicked Cedric, who was still lying on the sofa in a daze, off the sofa and then sat down on it himself. Don't show that kind of look or that kind of behavior. I don't know what's going on in your mind every day. I'll ask the house elves to move your luggage. Starting tonight, you must start losing weight. This dress is very expensive. If you can't wear it before the new press conference in February, then all the losses of this dress will be borne by you. My dear senior, you will really be selling yourself to me. You will have to work for me to pay off your debts for the rest of your life. After saying that, Karl took out the red wine that had been boiled long ago, a crystal wine glass, and a silver cigarette case from his ring. He deftly took a cigarette out of the box and filled his glass with red wine. After lighting it with magic, he sat on the sofa and smoked by himself. Cedric, who was kicked to the ground by him, was still sitting there pretending to be saying I can't do it. Karl spoke calmly through the layers of smoke. Regarding your previous question, the reason is very simple. Because of the identity of that stinky old man in this school. He is the headmaster first and my guardian second. Any action he takes represents Hogwarts. So, even if he has guessed the answer, he still has to take action, and the plan must be told to me personally. This way, we won't attract too much unnecessary criticism in school. As he spoke, Carol took a deep puff of cigarette, then raised his head and blew the smoke toward the ceiling. Watching the white smoke swelling upwards, he closed his eyes and spoke slowly. So, my dear senior, grow up quickly and stop using your brain. That is as simple as a paramecium. Don't think about all problems in a single way. The world is very complicated. Not all problems are like math problems. You can write a standard answer. You have seen the cruelty of this world and you want to make it a better place. Very good then. From now on you are my personal secretary, the closest kind. I will teach you as much as I can. how to be a bad guy, or how to do something you really want to do in this fucked up world. Cedric, who was sitting on the ground, finally returned to his normal sitting position. He stared at Carol blankly. His expression was a little lonely, and Carol's words reminded him of those cruel scenes that he didn't want to recall. The reason why he gained so much weight in just one holiday was because of what he had done during this holiday. Every time when he lay down on the bed and prepared to sleep, the burning city and those innocent children would come to his mind. There were also those soldiers who went ahead without hesitation, even though they knew they would burn themselves, and everything he saw on that peninsula. In order to survive, people sell their souls and their bodies. They just want to live. But it was such a simple idea, but they paid everything, and still lived in hell. In his past life growing up, he had never witnessed such a miserable situation, nor had he ever imagined that people could live in such a humble way. Unable to think about these questions, he could only suppress his resentment and helplessness by overeating and using delicious food. But even so, the food could no longer bring him happiness. Even when he was enjoying these delicious foods, a feeling of guilt would arise in his heart. Cedric lowered his head. His hair, which had not been trimmed for the entire holiday, covered his face and childishly disguised his inner distress. Don't feel guilty. Karl's voice sounded slowly, and he stood up and walked to Cedric's side without knowing when. Holding a lit cigarette in her hand, she stared at him intently with her blue eyes and spoke in a firm tone. Don't have such childish ideas. It will reduce your personal enjoyment and will not help the world at all. Any attempt to influence the world with personal power is childish and ridiculous. The world has always been, is now, and will continue to be class-based in the future. Only through constant struggle and only the most tenacious fighters can change this world. Aren't you depressed? Throw away those childish desserts. Adults will only appreciate something that hurts themselves and has a slightly bitter taste. As he spoke, he roughly inserted the cigarette into Cedric's mouth. Then he patted the other person's shoulder, stretched, and walked towards his bed. But just as he was about to lie down, Cedric, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. But what if I can't learn it? I'm not as brave and strong as you. I'm scared now. Hearing this, Carol just smiled and leaned back, sinking his whole body into the warm mattress, closing his eyes and speaking lightly. Don't you still have me? Don't worry, as long as I'm alive, I will protect you. Don't be afraid, you are the one I chose personally. How could I not learn it? As he spoke, he lazily raised one hand and pointed to the corner of the dormitory. One more thing. When you get up every morning, remember to water the flowers. I'm not in the mood to do that. Looking in the direction of the other person's finger, I saw a cluster of beautiful blue tulips quietly lying on the windowsill, with bursts of fragrance wafting in the breeze. Chapter 118, HERMIONEN-039, S changing image in Karl, 039, S confused. Time always flies so fast, and a month has passed since the holiday. Generally speaking, during this period, the British wizarding world was in turmoil, but at Hogwarts, everything was normal and peaceful. Now the discussion about Headmaster Dumbledore in the British wizarding community has reached a fever pitch. Both sides continued to debate and express their views in the Daily Prophet, and the language used in the debate was more restrained than before. It became increasingly sarcastic and even vulgar, and there was a sense of the first great debate in the British wizarding world. Dumbledore also became a little anxious from his initial calmness, especially when the old man found out that he had so many black fans in Britain. Professor McGonagall, who had become very depressed and already knew the truth, had approached Karl several times. He wanted the other party to clarify the truth immediately, but Karl refused on the grounds that the old man's reputation is not bad enough. The successive blows made Dumbledore refuse to see Karl again, until Karl passed by the headmaster's office one day. I accidentally left my membership cards of several of the most famous candy stores in the Muggle world in the principal's office. This made the sulking old man reluctantly accept the current situation. On the other hand, Professor Snape still acted as Dumbledore's black glove, accompanying Harry and Ron, playing the boring savior game. Today, in the auditorium. Karl stared at Cedric, who was eyeing the steak cake on his plate. While listening to Miss Beaver's account report, he gave her the notebook. After she finished her report, he solemnly handed it back to the other party. But when the other party was about to take it away, he was reluctant to let go. Looking at Hermione, whose temperament had changed drastically, Karl said with some concern, "Dear Miss Granger, I suggest you read some of Hegel's or Plato's philosophical theories. There are many academic works on economics. You can learn about them. There is no need to pay so much attention to Nietzsche's philosophy." He said this not because of Karl, who had nothing to do, but because of Hermione in front of him. Her temperament and style are completely different from the girls I knew before. Hermione used to be a typical white left thinker, with a missionary-like sense of responsibility towards everyone. She would constantly and desperately instill her ideas about studying hard and abiding by school rules into the ears of people she was familiar with. They will not hesitate to step forward to stop all unfair and unjust things, and have a natural sympathy for the weak. But now Hermione has not only changed a lot in appearance, but her previously messy long brown hair has also been combed neatly. A high ponytail paired with a pair of frameless titanium alloy glasses not only enhances the temperament, but also gives people a sense of distance and coldness when it comes to how she treats her classmates. The difference is even greater. She no longer helps her classmates tirelessly and unconditionally as before. He also became indifferent to the current situation of the house elves and those who spoke ill of him. Just smile calmly and say something like that from time to time. There are 3 levels of human spirit: camel, lion and baby. The first level is the camel, who endures humiliation and bears heavy burdens, passively obeying the arrangements of others or fate. The second level of lions turns passivity into initiative. From you should to I want. I take the initiative to fight for everything and take the responsibility of life. But I'm now in the third realm, a baby, a state of I am living in the present moment and enjoying everything that is now. Such philosophical words always made the students confused, but they did not dare to say anything bad to Hermione. But unlike other people who were completely unable to understand this situation, Karl could be sure that this was what Hermione said. After communicating with him, after the worldview and values are shattered, the huge psychological gap leads to an extreme psychological transformation. If Hermione before was a naive idealist, then now she is an individualist armed with philosophical ideas. Sure enough, as Karl expected, Hermione did not accept Karl's persuasion without any doubt as she did before the holiday. She just took her notebook back forcefully, then looked at Karl calmly and spoke, "Mr. Hohenzollern, there is no need to worry about my changes. I know what I'm doing. You have your way, I have my way. As for the proper way, the right way, and the only way, there is no such thing as a proper way, but fortunately, our ideas are the same. Different means and methods do not affect our cooperation. As long as your fundamental goal remains unchanged, we can still work together, and I will continue to learn and ensure that I'm professional enough. I will never hold you back." These words were said with such determination, and combined with Hermione's current appearance, they could be described as heroic. The innocent little girl Hannah and a group of Hufflepuff little girls were completely fascinated by her, seeing Carol's eyes twitching wildly, but it didn't matter. It was a good thing to attract some bored eyes. Just before Hermione left, Cole placed a small Hermes sachet in front of the girl as promised. The girl's eyes were a little vague at that moment, but after hearing Carol's words, they became cold again. Carol pointed at the bag and said lightly, "Okay, Miss Granger, I respect your idea. This small bag is not an ambiguous gift. It is a magical product. Some traceless expansion spells have been cast inside, so the space inside is much larger than you imagined. Through some channels, I was able to obtain many works on economic philosophy and management that were not available on the market. I think you would like it, since you are willing to take this path to become more professional as you said." "Of course." Hermione picked up the bag, snorted and turned away. Looking at the other person's back, Carol still felt a little strange. He turned to look at Cedric, who was about to do something to his steak, and asked with some confusion, "Why do I have a feeling that Hermione is angry with me? Did I do something wrong? Or is it the way I speak and act so annoying?" Cedric, who was asked the question, first seemed a little frustrated because he couldn't secretly eat the steak point. Then he looked at Karl and said with some regret, "Of course not, Mr. Hohenzollern. You are so professional and brave and so considerate. How could anyone think that you are inconsiderate of other people's feelings?" He is a stubborn, unreasonable, and even a little slow-witted guy, don't you think? Hearing this, Karl kept nodding at first, but he quickly reacted, grabbed Cedric's collar, put his face close to him, and stared at him and asked, "Ah, you scolding me? When have I ever been inconsiderate to you? Is it wrong to do this for your own good?" Just like that, the two most eye-catching boys in Hufflepuff House were once again face to face. All the students ate quietly, as if they were used to it. After all, if someone just wanted to disturb them, he will definitely be scolded by the group of girls watching. Until a cold voice came, I not here at the right time. Mr. Hohenzollern, it seems you have other things to do. Chapter 119 Professor Snape, Karl, 039, S Nemesis. Hearing this suddenly, Karl quickly let go of Cedric's collar and turned around with some embarrassment. At the same time as he did so, Karl's number one anti-fan leader Hannah, along with a group of good sisters, also turned their heads. I looked behind me angrily, wanting to see who was the blind person who dared to ruin my good deeds. As a result, after just one look, they were frightened and retreated quickly. Along with a group of Hufflepuff students, who hurriedly retreated with their plates. It turned out that Professor Snape had come behind the crowd at some point and was staring at Cole with a dark face. Although his image has changed a lot now, his smooth black hair is no longer as greasy as before and is neatly combed on both sides of his shoulders. The deep facial features and the black and green custom made long suit give people a sense of distance while also being beautiful enough. In fact, just after the holiday, Professor Snape appeared in front of the students and this image. It did cause a sensation, and many boys tried to imitate this look, and many girls were attracted by the handsome middle-aged professor. I couldn't help but feel a fondness for him, but unfortunately all this admiration and fondness were given to the wrong person. Professor Snape attributed all the kindness shown to him to his lack of attention in class or the snot of a troll getting into his head. So in the defense against the dark arts and potions classes, he tortured these students even more severely, and because of his cooperation with Karl. Professor Snape, whose pockets have become very well off, even has the time and money to prepare various healing potions before every class. He would place the potion directly on the podium, then look at the students below with cold eyes and speak mercilessly. "In my class, no unnecessary emotions are allowed. The only requirement is to be professional and serious enough. I believe that after this class, you will benefit a lot. As for those little accidents that happened to you during my teaching, things like broken bones, facial burns, and severe coma are completely irrelevant. I guarantee that you can all walk out of the class alive." Such inhumane words, coupled with the even more inhumane actions that followed, made all the students from grades 1 to 7 complain bitterly. What's more, when Professor Snape prepared the potion, he seemed to focus only on the strong medicinal properties to ensure that no matter how badly injured a student is in class, after taking a bottle, he will be full of energy and will not be affected in attending the next class. As for the smell of the potion, it can only be described as indescribable. The smell of butcher and rotten eggs are considered mild. I heard that Ron, who had always been inseparable from Harry, had his arm accidentally broken by Professor Snape during the defense against the dark arts class. As a result, after drinking the potion, the other person was so spicy that he couldn't utter a complete word for a week. But that is not the most important thing. After all, physical pain is bearable, but the psychological gap is even more difficult to let go. Whether it was accidental or intentional, after another accident, Ron simply took the wrong bottle of potion. After drinking the potion that Professor Snape prepared specially for Harry, the bleak taste he remembered did not appear. Instead, it smelled of a very refreshing orange juice. Harry, who was standing by, saw her friend standing there in a daze, and said with some comfort, "I don't think it tastes good, but Professor Snape said that potions of this flavor are rich in vitamins. It's better for your health. If you don't like it, he'll give me strawberry flavor tomorrow. You can try it then. That one tastes better." After Hearing his friend's caring words, Ron was so moved that he burst into tears as a result. This guy cried too loudly and was discovered by the sharp-eyed Professor Snape and was deducted 20 points from Gryffindor. He was also sentenced to 7 days of solitary confinement for handling the smelly carcasses of snotty caterpillars with his bare hands without gloves, so much so that now at the Gryffindor table, Ron still occupied a large area by himself, and no one dared to sit next to him. In order to avoid the indelible stench that would ruin your appetite or make you faint on the spot. So when Professor Snape, who is so considerate and sympathetic to his students, glorious deeds, appears in front of a group of little badgers, only then will they be able to endure the pain of not being able to eat properly and retreat immediately. But of course this kind of thing would never happen to Karl. He just glanced at Professor Snape and asked calmly, "Don't get me wrong, Professor. I'm just educating some fool who can't appreciate my special tenderness. Nothing awkward will happen. By the way, what do you want to talk to me about? Special tenderness, huh, Professor?" Snape looked at Karl, then at Cedric, sighed, and then nodded. Such frequent movements aroused the curiosity of the little badgers, and Professor Snape was stared at by everyone in surprise. He took out a piece of paper from his shirt pocket and filled in the parameters into the equation in detail. Then he went through a series of calculations that no one could understand, looked up at Karl again, and said seriously, "After the last time I improved the formula, after a month of observation, I found out why the calculation results were the same twice, almost exactly the same. You no need to be so precise, Professor." Karl stood up quickly, so fast that everyone could only see a shadow. He quickly came to Professor Snape, snatched the draft paper from his hand, and stuffed it into his ring without leaving a trace. Then he grabbed Professor Snape's hands, stared into his eyes, and said with a forced smile, "Let's talk about business first. If there are any problems, solve them. Please use your professional skills as much as possible in the things I have assigned to you. Stop using your formulas to calculate the relationships between people. They are definitely inaccurate." Professor Snape, whose hands were held, had confusion in his eyes as he looked at the anxious boy in front of him. Said with some doubt, "Impossible. My formula is proven. I will give it to Professor McGonagall as compensation for my drastic change in appearance. This mathematical formula is very accurate and reliable in preventing premature love in grades 6 and 7, especially in terms of relationships." "I think it would be impolite to continue talking." Karl interrupted Professor Snape directly and quietly set up a soundproofing spell around the two of them. To be honest, he was helpless as he couldn't control his charm. You can't ask a sunflower not to face the sun. Fortunately, his hiding skills are very good, and most people can't see any clues at all, and he can also curb those boring and unreasonable thoughts. But it seemed that no matter how superb the performance was, it had no effect on the professor in front of him. He was as precise as a machine. It is really terrible that the results can be obtained by simply calculating the parameters one by one without any deviation. When Karl thought of this, he became a little panicked. He had to find a way to make Professor Snape stop this dangerous behavior in the days to come. In order to prevent the image he had worked so hard to build from being destroyed by this guy, he thought hard and came up with a solution. After a few seconds he looked at Professor Snape seriously and asked calmly, "Have you used this formula to calculate the relationship between you and Harry?" Chapter 120 VOLDEMORT and -039 S stupid plan. Just as Karl expected, the name Harry immediately triggered Professor Snape's system bug. As soon as it appeared, the sharp look in his eyes started to blur a little, and his icy, iron-like face showed signs of melting. And beneath the ice layer that was beginning to crack, there was still some panic. After a short silence, Professor Snape calmly shook his head and said with some self-mockery, "I have, but it's useless. I've tried to calculate it every night for the past month, but the results are always so different that they make this formula meaningless." Watching a handsome middle-aged man feeling panic and self-pitying, because of a little girl. This change in expression made the girls watching look so handsome and cool. Other boys felt that this style was good and they could learn it, and it looked quite attractive. And in Carol's eyes, there was only, "You old man, you have come to this day, and I won't take advantage of you." But although he thought so, he couldn't say it out loud. He immediately changed his expression to one that showed concern for the other person. He sighed, patted Professor Snape's shoulder, and said helplessly, "I said that this formula is flawed and can only be applied to ordinary people. If the character's personality is complex enough, it is difficult to calculate the result, so you'd better not use it anymore, or you can continue to improve it until you figure out the exact relationship between you and Harry one day. It might be much better if we take it out and use it again, otherwise it's too embarrassing." These words were said so sincerely that Professor Snape couldn't help but nod his head. Seeing that the hidden danger had been eliminated, Karl immediately changed the subject. "Okay, let's not discuss this anymore. Tell me what you want from me." Hearing this, Professor Snape looked around, then looked at Cole with some confusion, and said with his eyes twitching, "You sure you want to talk about that person's problem here? Isn't it a bit too ostentatious?" "Oh, right." Karl reacted and quickly removed the silencing spell they had placed around the two of them, while winking at Professor Snape. Professor Snape rolled his eyes at him, snorted coldly, then changed his expression and spoke sternly. "You failed the potions homework you handed in to me last time. Come here right now. You don't have any classes this afternoon. I will punish you by having you go to the potion classroom to help me process the raw materials for the potion and supervise you to make up your homework." After he finished speaking, he turned around on the spot and walked away quickly with a strong aura. Karl immediately put on an expression as if he had lost his parents and stood there sighing. Cedric, who was standing by, hurried over with concern, tried his best to suppress the raised corner of his mouth, and said sympathetically, "Professor Snape's punishment is really sad. It's so sad, Mr. Hohenzollern." As this guy spoke, the corners of his suppressed mouth almost curled up to the sky, which made Karl look very upset. He patted it hard, and the guy's face was almost paralyzed because he was happy, but didn't dare to show it. Said calmly, "I'm so glad you care about me like this, Mr. Diggory, so I'll take good care of you as well. Forget about the dinner tonight. I will ask the house elf to prepare 6 cups of buttermelon juice for you. Enjoy my care." After saying that, Karl turned around and left, leaving Cedric standing there in a daze with a puzzled look on his face. "No, Professor Snape punished you. Why do you blame me? You are such a stingy person." But just as Cole was about to leave the Hufflepuff table, this guy seemed to have a brain cramp again, remembered something and suddenly spoke loudly. "By the way, if you can't go back to the dormitory to sleep tonight, can I sleep in your bed? Your mattress is so comfortable." After these words were spoken, the noisy cafeteria suddenly became as quiet as a morgue. Karl disappeared from everyone's sight at the fastest speed, and began to conceive in his mind as he walked how to once again give everyone present a piece of cake containing the potion of forgetfulness with an extremely heavy heart. Karl came to Professor Snape's office. This office, like Slytherin's dormitory, is located in the basement of Hogwarts Castle. And the entire office is not large in area. But it was dark and eerie, and all kinds of strange potion ingredients were packed in glass jars with labels, immersed in the colorful liquid. It looked very strange under the light of the only skull chandelier above its head. Coupled with the cast iron door at the entrance, it is big enough to be called a safe vault. No wonder Professor Snape has punished students there. They all said that they felt like they were locked in a dungeon. Don't you plan to change the decoration here? This environment looks a bit uncomfortable. Karl looked around and immediately gave his own evaluation. Professor Snape, who was sitting behind his desk, just looked at him coldly. "Shut up, Mr. Hohenzollern. Why do you like changing people so much? These are the first words you said when we met. It's commenting on my hair, and the first time you come to this place, it's commenting on my office. We are not that familiar with each other yet. Please keep a certain distance." After saying that, he took out another piece of paper from his sleeve and threw it to Karl like a dart. Then he sat aside and waited silently. Karl was too lazy to talk nonsense. He just opened the paper and started reading. The more he looked, the wider his eyes became. Finally, he pointed at the lines of text on the paper, looked at Professor Snape in shock, and asked in surprise, you sure you didn't take the wrong one? This is the plan that Professor Quirrell, or rather Voldemort, handed to you personally. He wants to use this plan to steal the Philosopher's Stone and attack Hogwarts at the same time. Is there such a stupid and simple plan in the world? At the end, Karl even got a little mad. He slammed the paper on the table and pointed at it for a long time without saying a word. Professor Snape looked at the other person and sighed helplessly. He did not make any sarcastic remarks about Karl's current misconduct. Because when he first saw the plan on the paper, he had basically the same reaction as the other person. It was clearly written on that piece of paper. The first step is to have those dark wizards attack Hogwarts and attract Dumbledore's attention. The second step is for the Great Dark Lord to obtain the Philosopher's Stone. Step 3. While occupying Hogwarts, announce the return of the Dark Lord. There was nothing else. Karl looked at the paper and followed Professor Snape's example, sitting quietly aside in silence. Although he knew in advance that Voldemort was a psychopath who only knew how to resort to violence, he really couldn't imagine at the other part his brain could be so stupid that a plan like this could be 100 times more complicated than a plan made by a child playing a war game. Not to mention other things, just the first step is simply impossible. Just look at the reports that Professor Snape had made about those ugly black wizards he had found. He also wanted to lure Dumbledore away, but he would probably be taken down on the spot after just one encounter, and the Philosopher's Stone is even more ridiculous. As the most famous alchemical creation in the magic world, it will probably take more than a day or two to understand its structure and application. What's the point of just grabbing it? If you don't know how to use it, it's just a piece of broken stone. When he thought of this, Karl couldn't help but scratch his head. He thought to himself, I might be the only villain who is troubled by the fact that my opponent is too weak and too stupid. Chapter 121, Speech on Sin. There's no point in worrying about it now. I just want to hear what you want to do. Looking at the silent Karl, Professor Snape spoke calmly. Cole was completely speechless. After taking a few deep breaths, he habitually took out a bottle of wine and a pack of cigarettes from his ring. But when he was about to open the bottle, Professor Snape grabbed his hand and said seriously, I won't stop you if you want to commit suicide, but such depraved behavior of yours will not be allowed in my office. I'm not interested in seeing you being sad here. I just want to hear your solution. Karl couldn't help but pout and sulk. He had no sympathy at all. Couldn't he see that he was very distressed now? But after all, it was someone else's territory, so he could only put the things away reluctantly, tapping the table with his hand while thinking and talking. Since your previous partner was so low-end and hilarious, there is nothing we can do. It's obviously impossible to persuade that psychopath to change his plan. The only thing we can do is to try to make his plan full of loopholes. It will be easier to execute. Let's start with those dark wizards first. What do you want to do? Professor Snape's words were still cold. Karl said it very simply. Kill them. What? I said kill them. Karl looked at the puzzled Professor Snape and said word by word deliberately, don't doubt your ears. Those rubbish are totally unqualified. If you want to attack Hogwarts, you must have more powerful helpers. It would be very troublesome to look for other people in such a short time, and it would also arouse Voldemort's suspicion. So we can only borrow their bodies. As for their lives and their souls, they are no longer needed. He said this so easily that Professor Snape's eyes twitched wildly. He took a deep breath, looked dimly at the calm boy in front of him, and said with some self-mockery, you clear about what you said? You are now a student of Hogwarts. You acknowledged this to your professor in person. You want to kill someone. Just based on this sentence, with your current status, you will be immediately imprisoned in Azkaban, and there will never be a chance for you to be released. Karl didn't care at all. He looked at Professor Snape dimly and spoke calmly. Who said I was going to kill someone? I never expressed such an intention. Don't you think so, Professor? Hearing this, Professor Snape immediately stood up, pushed open the door of his office, pointed outside the door, and said without question, "Get out of my office. I can pretend I didn't hear anything, but if you ask me to kill someone, I don't want to, and I can't do it." Karl waved his hands quickly and said innocently, "Don't be so excited, dear professor. How could I ask you to do it yourself? I never said that. Am I, in your heart, an unscrupulous boss who leaves all the dirty work and all the shady things to you? I am different from that shameless bee. I have dignity. What I just said was just based on an inference. After all, those 5 dark wizards usually commit many evil deeds and their crimes are too numerous to list. It is normal for them to have a few enemies. It's normal to die on the streets. What on earth do you want to do?" Professor Snape's tone became much colder, and he stared at Karl. The other party seemed to be very confident, and was unspeakably calm. He took out a piece of parchment from his arms, and placed it on the table. He made a please look gesture, then sat aside, and waited quietly. The stalemate lasted for about 5 minutes. Professor Snape had no choice but to sit back in his seat, picked up the parchment, and took a look at it. His eyes widened instantly, and his hands holding the parchment trembled a little. He examined it carefully several times, then he slowly looked up at Karl. "Just this piece of paper is enough to keep you in Azkaban forever. This level of dark magic potion, it is comparable to the 3 unforgivable curses, and even more vicious." "Thank you for the compliment," Karl responded calmly with a smile on his face. He looked at Professor Snape again with a smile on his face, but his tone was unusually cold. "Dear Professor, please stop using those unfounded fantasies. At Hogwarts, I can keep my dear classmates company. You can play this game of house, but you must not forget what kind of deal we are making. That is also completely illegal and even unethical. We can play a role, but we can't let the mask of performance stay on our face for too long, otherwise you won't be able to tell which face is the real you." "What is your ultimate goal?" Professor Snape asked calmly. Karl couldn't help but sigh and shake his head, saying helplessly, "You are the 3rd Auror who has asked me this question since I entered the British wizarding world. Principal Dumbledore and you both asked this question, and I gave the same answer. I want to be a skilled villain, or rather a boring magical world, and contribute some high-level crimes." As he spoke, Karl slowly stood up and began his speech under the dim light. He opened his arms, as if this dark little room was the stage, and all the strange objects and the glass bottles, it was his audience. That he spoke calmly, his voice powerful, whether it's Grindelwald or Voldemort, who calls himself the Dark Lord. The entire wizarding world is simply boring to the point of being boring in my opinion. You seem to be still in the Middle Ages. Everyone has a utopian fantasy that the world is just like this, but I'm different. I was born in New York, that shining city, known as the crossroads of the world, but it has another name. Do you know? City of Sin. Professor Snape said lightly. "Yes, Sin City." Karl began to smile. Like all the famous speakers in history, he began to use his facial expressions and body language to infect his audience, even if there was no one in front of him. But he still worked very hard, and his words became increasingly intense. "Many people come here because of New York's specialties, the fashionable financial elites, the carnival that never stops, and the endless stream of pilgrims from all over the world. But that's just the colorful reflection on the water under the neon lights. The real face of this city is hidden in the sewers. There is endless crime. The most numerous gang members in New York City are always gang members. They are everywhere in every civilian neighborhood. Every day they are caught up in endless gang feuds and turf wars. Their daily attire is extremely extravagant and disgusting. But if you think this is my ultimate sin and villainy, then you are completely mistaken. True evil can never reveal itself." Chapter 122, The Pathetic Double Agent. Professor Snape. "What do you mean?" Professor Snape was a little confused after hearing this. Karl seemed very interested and continued to speak. "I once spent some time in a gang in New York, and there was a very vivid scene. There was an older gang member, we all called him Old Jack. At a normal gathering, there was a very smart black boy who found him and asked him for some detailed methods of highway robbery. As a result, the old man just squinted his eyes at the other party and said calmly, "John, you shouldn't come to me for advice on these issues. You are very smart. You should study more and eventually go to college to become a lawyer or doctor. Then you can legally rob everyone and never be punished by the law." After Karl finished speaking, Professor Snape fell completely silent. Under Karl's influence, he read a lot of books about the Muggle world. He also understood the operating logic of the current Muggle world, and of course he understood that there were many unreasonable and exploitative phenomena in that world. But the feeling obtained from those words, no matter how profound, is not as frightening as Karl's short sentence. Karl, however, seemed to not care at all about what the other person was thinking and continued to speak to himself. "So, after that moment, I completely understood what I wanted to do, to achieve my ultimate goal. What should I do? I will lead this magical world forward and establish a complete system. Then, it will be a natural progression for all wizards to become my slaves, and the process will be completely legal. They won't even be aware of the change in their identities." At the end of the day, Karl's behavior was a little crazy, like a kid who got a high score on an exam. Walk up to Professor Snape and start showing off. "How about it? Do you feel scared after listening to this?" "Don't worry, I'm just imitating certain people. After all, it is quite difficult to surpass those people. After all, the degree of their evil methods and the degree of their perverted behavior. Personally, I'm not at that level yet." After showing off, Karl sat back in his seat and looked at Professor Snape quietly, as if waiting for his praise. Professor Snape stood there in a daze for who knows how long, before he turned his head mechanically and said to Karl with some self-mockery, "Before Dumbledore, he wanted me to keep a close eye on you and not let you get involved in dark magic, so as to prevent you from being attracted by the power and losing your way. Now, it seems that the old man doesn't understand you at all. Compared to Grindelwald and even Voldemort, you are much worse and more frightening." "Thank you for the compliment." Karl responded happily again, and then said calmly, "Okay, now we are talking to each other. Can you make this potion?" "Of course." Professor Snape nodded calmly, but he seemed to still have doubts. "But this potion can only be used to control the dead. It cannot enhance the strength of those people. I want to increase the power of the dead. I don't know how to do that level of black magic, and I can't do it. I'm afraid no one in this world can do it either. As for the person who has heard of this kind of dark magic, I think the only one in this world, besides Voldemort, is Dumbledore. What are you going to do?" "Simple." Karl smiled indifferently, pointed at himself and said calmly, "I can learn. Just follow my instructions. Don't worry about the rest. I will definitely find a way to." Professor Snape, these words sounded like outrageous talk, but he did not refute them. He just looked at Karl quietly. He asked his next question. "Okay, I will believe you can do it for now, so what's next?" "The premise of Voldemort's entire plan is to lure Dumbledore away. I think you might have been deceived by the old man's appearance. He is not so easy to deal with. In comparison, Dumbledore is far more troublesome than Voldemort." "What about this question?" Karl paused deliberately, then said with a meaningful expression, "On the contrary, it is much simpler. It doesn't necessarily mean something major has happened for Headmaster Dumbledore to leave the school. Can't he go see an old friend whom he has always wanted to see, but has never been able to? I already have someone for this. You don't have to worry." After Karl answered 2 questions in a row with a nonchalant attitude, Professor Snape put away the parchment without further ado. He was about to get up to see the guest off, but Karl grabbed his arm. He motioned for him to sit down, then looked at him with some embarrassment and said, "But before that, someone must assure that old man that Hogwarts is absolutely safe, otherwise it may not be possible. Also, we need to increase the intensity of Voldemort, making him lose his mind, or at least a little crazy, and his strength must also be enhanced, otherwise, I would have no sense of accomplishment if I killed him." Hearing this, Professor Snape's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Karl dimly, but Karl just smiled at him. With eye contact. No words are needed. Professor Snape was immediately unhappy. He suddenly stood up and shouted while gasping for breath, "No, why must I be the one to do this kind of double agent work? Is it in the minds of the two of you, one old and one young, am I born to do such shady things? Could it be that in your eyes, I don't care about my personal image at all?" Faced with the questioning, Karl was also a little embarrassed. He touched his lips and took out another piece of paper from his pocket helplessly. He said apologetically as he handed it to Professor Snape, "It's up to you to do this. After all, Harry is involved, and I need someone to protect her safety." "Harry, Professor." Snape jumped up suddenly, stared at Karl angrily and spoke bluntly, "You never told me that you would let Harry get involved. Why are you so arrogant? You are going too far, Mr. Hohenzollern, by treating everyone as your pawns." Karl was not afraid of the other person's eyes at all, and said calmly, "Because only Harry can get the Philosopher's Stone. You and I both know this. Without the Philosopher's Stone, the play cannot go on. What you have to do." After saying that, Karl stood up and prepared to leave, while Professor Snape sat in his seat in a daze. He watched the other person's back disappear from his sight, then suddenly clenched his fist and slammed it hard on the table. With a loud bang, he roared angrily, "Arsehole, a little arsehole and an old arsehole, if you say you two have nothing to do with each other, I'll be the first one to not believe it." But after cursing, he could only helplessly put away the paper on the table without even reading the contents of the paper. It is a secret of the Mirror of Verized, which can be regarded as a token of allegiance prepared by the other party for Voldemort. But what he didn't expect was that under the paper, there was a note with a line of complicated mathematical formulas written on it. The result of the math formula is 0. And there is a line of text underneath. "I used your mathematical formula to calculate the relationship between you and Harry. The result may be different from your calculation. She trusts you now, dear Professor. Sometimes you may win more by not being so rational." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, Deteriorating Friendship. There is no doubt that the final villain must be Professor Snape. He is the one who has been coveting the treasure in the secret room on the 4th floor, and the unicorn attack in the Forbidden Forest a few days ago must have been done by him. Only he could be so evil. During the lunch break in the Great Hall, a circle of little wizards gathered around a long Hufflepuff table to watch the fun. I listened with great interest as Ron analyzed the strange things that had happened in Hogwarts in the past few days compared with the previous month. The overall atmosphere in the school this month is no longer so quiet and peaceful, but rather a bit tense. Outside the school, the great debate in the British wizarding world about Headmaster Dumbledore was finally coming to an end. In general, the opposition prevailed, and the reputation that Headmaster Dumbledore had accumulated over nearly half a century was completely tarnished. Many onlookers said that they were blind and did not realize that Leo Deng was so immoral and shameless. If before, Headmaster Dumbledore's reputation was considered the top of Mount Everest. So now his reputation cannot be said to be below sea level, but it can be said to have fallen to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. To put it in a positive way, there is huge room for growth. In reality, there is little room for decline. Such a huge gap made Dumbledore, like Professor Quirrell before him, lock himself in the headmaster's office all day and all night, and not see anyone. So much so that Professor McGonagall specially found Karl and asked him to quickly clarify the truth of the matter, to prevent the headmaster from being unable to accept the blow and having an accident in the headmaster's office. However, judging from the amount of candy orders Karl received from the kitchen house elf, the old man did it on purpose. By locking myself in the office, I can avoid work and eat candy in peace. This is really killing two birds with one stone, and is a malicious move. Apart from the annoying old Deng, he is now the most discussed person among the students in the castle. It is undoubtedly Professor Snape. After all, not everyone can understand the way he cares for his students. so it is normal to have some misunderstandings combined with the unicorn attack that occurred in the Forbidden Forest 2 days ago. Professor Snape successfully completed his mission point. This completely confirmed his image of being two-faced, sinister and cunning point, but even so, there are still people willing to defend Professor Snape, such as Harry point, seeing that Ron was getting more and more outrageous. She couldn't help but frown and speak. Don't talk about that, Ron. I don't think Professor Snape is that kind of person. He must have some unspeakable difficulties, some sinister, cunning, and shameless villain must have forced him to do that. As soon as these words were spoken, Karl became unhappy. He had been sitting aside quietly eating melon. Suddenly, he was inexplicably burdened with 2 adjectives that did not belong to him, and he immediately wanted to refute point. Before he could even open his mouth, the opposing side of the discussion finally entered the discussion. Shut your stinky mouth, you disgusting Mr. Weirlie. If you continue to speak without restraint, you will wantonly damage the reputation of our dean of the college. I promise you will be punished, and it will be worse than when you spilled the stink bug potion in Professor Snape's office, and fainting from the stink is a far harsher punishment. Before the Draco people arrived, the voice with a superior tone had already entered and attracted all attention with just a few words. Of course, this also included Ron, who looked at them angrily, while Draco and his 2 followers behind him shouted loudly without any scruples, "You are lying. You Slytherins are born evil. The you-know-who is from your house." I can guarantee that Professor Snape must have an unclear relationship with him. He might even be his subordinate. As soon as the name Mysterious Man appeared, all the little wizards present shuddered all over. The look they gave Draco and his group was no longer as indifferent as before, but instead there was a deep fear in their eyes. Hearing this, Draco's face instantly turned red. He ran towards Ron quickly and grabbed him by the collar. He asked aggressively, raising his fist, "Say it again, you annoying red-haired fellow. You are so outspoken. You are the kind of person who is qualified to judge Slytherin House. You are the last in your grade, except that you are better at playing magic cards. You may eat more than others, but what special skills do you have? Why do you keep spreading unfounded rumors every day? You keep pestering Harry day and night. I will definitely make you pay." After making the threat, Draco seemed to be still unsatisfied and raised his fist to teach the guy in front of him a lesson point. Before he could do anything, Ron, who was caught by him, kicked Draco in the crotch. A sound was heard, causing all the boys present to squeeze their legs together. Draco fell to the ground with a distorted expression, wanting to moan, but unable to utter a word. Seeing their boss being beaten, Draco's 2 followers immediately rushed forward to avenge their boss. Before he could do anything, Harry, who had been struggling on the side, saw Draco lying on the ground groaning in pain. He immediately stared at Ron angrily and shouted loudly, "What are you doing? How can you hit your classmates in such a despicable way? You disappoint me so much, Ron." After scolding, Harry trotted to Draco, carefully helped him up, and asked gently, "Are you okay, Mr. Malfoy? I'm really sorry. Ron didn't mean it. I apologize to you on his behalf." "How is it? Does it hurt? Otherwise, I will take you to the infirmary." No, it doesn't hurt at all." Draco held on. Even though his face was covered in sweat due to the pain, he still pretended to be indifferent. "That red-haired wretch couldn't hurt the noble Malfoy. I really didn't feel any pain at all." "Harry, thank you for your concern, really, but no matter how strong his words were, his body was always obedient, and Draco was helped up by Harry. He took a step forward and fell to the ground instantly because of the severe pain in his crotch. Fortunately, Harry reacted quickly and hugged the other person, then looked at him with some blame. "There's no need to be so stubborn. If the pain is unbearable, just rest here for a while." Having said that, our beautiful Gryffindor princess knelt calmly on the ground and placed Malfoy's head quietly on her legs. Then he turned to look at Ron, whose expression was extremely strange, and said in a reproachful manner, "Why are you still standing there? Go get a professor or some students to carry Draco to the infirmary." As a result. This sentence seemed to be the last straw that broke the camel's back. Ron's eyes, at this moment, became as red as burning coals, staring at the two people on the ground. Suddenly he yelled like a madman, "I will definitely find evidence. You have all been deceived by the cunning Slytherin." After saying that, he roughly pushed away the crowd of onlookers and ran out of the auditorium like a madman. All that was left was a group of students looking at each other in confusion. Seeing Ron suddenly leave for some reason, Harry had no choice but to look at Karl, who had been sitting in his seat with a smile on his face. "Excuse me, Mr. Hohenzollern. Can you use some magic to help Draco? He looks so painful." Is it painful?" Cole laughed at himself, looking at Draco, who was enjoying the Gryffindor princess's lap. He shook his head in disdain, stood up and prepared to leave, but before leaving, he glanced at the entrance of the auditorium. Said incomprehensible, "He is not in any pain, my dear Miss Harry, but he will be in real pain if he does not get up." Chapter 124. Another dear old man. Looking at this handsome old man, Carl's face twitched involuntarily, but this should be the first time we met. Why does this old guy in the magical world like to let people recognize him as his father so much? But considering that we can hear it from this old guy's mouth. In order to find out his true origins, Carl decided to follow up on the other party's question. "What do you mean by this? Does it mean that there is some kind of relationship between you and me? If that is the case, before we discuss the next issue, I hope you can tell me what you know truthfully." This statement was well reasoned and the tone was calm. Carol thought that the other party would not tell him the truth directly. He would have revealed some relevant clues, but he didn't expect that Grindelwald, who was sitting opposite Carl, would just smile slightly. He asked in a somewhat funny way, "I think you should have asked Dumbledore about this question and what he told you when asked this question." Although Karl felt a little strange, he still told the truth. "No, the old man won't say anything, but you should be different from him. You can, humph." Before Karl could finish his words, Grindelwald suddenly snorted coldly and said with a little temper, "He doesn't even want to tell me. Why should I tell him? If he doesn't tell you, I won't tell you either." Damn. Looking at the old man in front of him who was throwing a tantrum, Karl's mind was a little confused. Something was wrong. This is totally different from the Grindelwald in his memory. Isn't he the elegant, seductive Dark Lord? Why is it that the person in front of me looks more and more like a young man who just had a fight with his lover and is still throwing a tantrum? Karl began to doubt whether he had traveled through time to the wrong place and what happened to the characters in this world. The characters did not match the impression he had of them at all, especially Dumbledore and the handsome old man in front of him. In this way, the old and the young sat in the room staring at each other, and 10 full minutes passed. Grindelwald was the first to ask, "Okay, let's not discuss that cowardly guy. First, tell me how you saw through my disguise, Kit." "I think my performance was perfect enough." Hearing this, Carol could only calm down, suppress his doubts in his heart, and after thinking for a moment, he analyzed it seriously. "Your performance is truly seamless, whether it's the character's image, mannerisms, or the details of your daily behavior. They are all perfect enough, but just like there is no perfect flower in the world, everything has flaws. You also have your flaws, such as the guy you mentioned who has no courage." After saying that, Carol paused and took a deep look at the old man in front of him. Only then did he feel relieved and prepared to continue speaking. After all, the other party could be regarded as one of the most powerful wizards in the entire magical world. Although it can be judged from the other party's communication that he and I have a close relationship, what if any of my words anger the other party? With my current strength, that would not be fun. After making sure that the other person's expression had not changed, he continued, "The first time you showed your weakness was in your class, when you talked about what happened between Headmaster Dumbledore and you in 1945. There was a slight fluctuation in your tone. Even though it only lasted for a few seconds, I still felt it." The second floor was in the auditorium, when all the faculty and staff had lunch with the students every Sunday. "You are always the first to leave, but you never go far. You always stand in the corridor outside the Great Hall, quietly looking at Headmaster Dumbledore, as For the third floor, it is a bit complicated. It can be called a flaw, but I would rather call it a perfect mistake. That's because your portrayal of Professor Lockhart is simply too good. No one can be so perfect. Like everything in this world, behind perfection, there is always deception. After Karl slowly pointed out his 3 flaws, Grindelwald did not get angry, but just smiled calmly. Finally, he looked at Karl gently and nodded. You are more mature than I thought, kid. In some ways, you are even more mature than an old man like me. I am glad to see you. Tell me, what is your purpose in coming here? Hearing the other party say that he wanted to talk about business, Carol didn't mean to beat around the bush and spoke directly. After the final exams, a certain psychopath who is not presentable will implement an extremely stupid plan. The premise of that plan is that I hope someone can lure Dumbledore away from Hogwarts. If it were normal, I might use other means, but now, since you are here by my side, it is up to you to do this. What's the reason? Grindelwald did not agree, but did not directly refuse. Carol was also very direct. He stared at the other party angrily and spoke while tapping the table with his hand. You actually asked me the reason, so I'll tell you directly. You and that old man, please quickly sort out the mess between you two. Then tell me everything I want to know. I'm tired of playing these riddles with you people every day. It would be best if you take that old man away and leave. The position of the headmaster of Hogwarts will be vacant for me. Such domineering and somewhat angry words made the smile on Grindelwald's face even more intense. He looked at the handsome young man in front of him. He kept looking him up and down, then nodded and said, you are really direct and domineering. You are more like me, unlike that old man who doesn't even have the courage to face his own heart. Haven't you been hiding in that tall tower for almost half a century? Karl interrupted the other party's complacency, which made Grindelwald a little embarrassed, and he changed the subject. It seems that you know a lot. Since you have basically guessed the truth, why do you have to listen to us? But Carol snorted coldly and said with disdain, I know it, but it's different when you tell it to me in person. I'm not the type who likes to hide in the dark. You are a self-indulgent bootlicker. No matter whether the result is good or bad, I will face it directly. This is your style. In the future, my method of ruling the magical world will also be the same. Open and above board, and legal. After hearing this, Grindelwald nodded silently. Very good. I appreciate that. I agree to your request. I will help you lure Dumbledore away from Hogwarts. Very good. Karl nodded with satisfaction, but also asked with some curiosity, can you tell me how you want to do this? I don't have any suspicion in my heart. I'm just simply curious. If you don't want to say it, don't force it. There's nothing I can't tell you. Grindelwald was full of confidence. He produced a note out of thin air and then threw it directly to Karl. Said calmly, no special means are needed. A line of text is enough. Hearing this, Karl couldn't help but feel curious and wanted to see what kind of words could have such great magic. As a result, when I looked down for the first time, I always felt a little overwhelmed. All I saw was what was written on the note. Can I see you? I've actually been thinking about you, Gale. Just as Cole was still recalling the shock that the small paragraph of cursive font on the note brought to him. But Grindelwald's smiling voice came faintly to my ears. Don't be surprised. You should have guessed this long ago, since I have already agreed to your request. Then, answer me a question. How far have you and the boy from your school progressed? Chapter 125. Karl 039's secret was exposed. WTF. There was great confusion in Karl's small eyes, and he looked at the handsome old man in front of him in disbelief. It felt like there were 10,000 alpacas running in his heart, and he was controlled by the other party's question for a whole minute point. He gradually reacted and asked back with some hopelessness, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what you just said. I want to ask what stage of development you are talking about. Is it the degree of organizational structure, the degree of pure friendship, or the kind of vulgar ideas I imagined? Karl tried to awaken the other party's sense of shame, but it was obvious that Grindelwald no longer seemed to care about those things. Said bluntly, how can I describe it as vulgar? But it's definitely not a relationship between friends. I just want to know how your relationship is going. Do you like him, or is he just unrequitedly in love with you? What are you talking about? Cole was a little mad. Is there no normal person in this castle? It's just pure friendship. I'm not that perverted. I'm not that kind of person. That's a pity. Grindelwald smiled disrespectfully. It seems that another person is about to be hurt by that false emotion. As he spoke, he deliberately paused and stared at Carol quietly. There's no need to look at me like that. I'm who you imagine me to be in your mind, and I have no intention of hiding it now. Hearing this, Carol stood up and prepared to leave, but he didn't expect that his body could not move at all. Grindelwald on the opposite side also put away the smile that was always on his face, turned serious and asked softly, "Don't be in such a hurry to leave. The wonderful parent-child time is over. Now tell me your plans. I hope to get a general understanding so that I can judge whether you can take on the heavy responsibility I intend to give you now." Karl, who was restrained in the chair, looked at Grindelwald in front of him and had to say that the other party was a truly perfect actor. The speed of this temperament change is so fast that even he cannot control it so well now. He was a gossipy old man 1 second ago, but turned into a restrained and elegant boss. The next point, the light emitted from those heterochromatic pupils was so sharp and cold it was as if, as the person being questioned, if I didn't answer a question correctly in the next second, my life might come to an end point. But who is he? Karl Hohenzollern, the most obedient and studious student in the history of Hogwarts. How could they bow down to an evil force of unknown origin, especially when the other party is so vulgar and gossipy? So he said disdainfully, "What plan? I never said that. I came here to discuss the plan. I'm just a student. Studying is my only job. Don't make random assumptions, especially since you are like this now. I don't have anything else to show for myself. I won't." Karl's words were interrupted by something hard to refuse, and he saw Grindelwald looking at him with a smile. I knew in my heart that the child was a little angry about my question just now, but at the same time he was being cautious. I don't want to say much, and I even looked down on myself a little bit. As a leader who was once followed by most of the wizards in Europe, he was very concerned about this disobedient child. Of course he has countless methods, but today he chose the most direct, effective, and gentle one. Give me money. The handsome old man took out a pure gold key and a bunch of rusty bronze keys from his arms. He calmly placed it on the table next to him, then spoke calmly. In the Gringotts Bank in the UK, there is a huge fortune hidden by the French Rosier family after 1945. This is the key to the vault door. As for the bunch next to it, it's the key to the castle where I used to live in Germany. I still ask the same question. Tell me about your plan, so that I can judge whether you are capable of taking on this heavy burden. Looking at the pure gold key engraved with the Rochelle family crest and inlaid with moonstones, rubies, emeralds and various gems and the bunch of rusty bronze keys, Karl's throat tightened a little, and there was a trace of regret in his heart. Damn, it was so hasty. It seems that the previous adoption agreement was signed too early. It is obvious that this is a wildfather in front of me. It's much more delicious than that stingy old man Dumbledore, and from what he said, it seems that this is just an appetizer sure enough, compared to that psychopath who only knows how to kill people, and his organization, that looks like a beggar gang gathering. The person in front of him was more in line with the positioning of the Dark Lord, but Karl still did not intend to give in. And he said something with hidden meaning. Money can't buy everything. Sometimes secrets are more valuable than money. Besides, how do I know that what you say is true? I'd like to see something more practical, rather than something like this where you can't measure the value on the spot. Besides, as the most well-behaved student in Hogwarts, how could I possibly say so many unnecessary words to a guy like you who has a questionable background? The meaning is very clear, just 2 words: add money. But the other party to the transaction seemed dissatisfied with this answer. Grindelwald smiled and crossed his legs, tapping his joints with the index finger of his right hand. He spoke casually, as if he had just recalled something. Good. student, but I heard different news at St. John's Elementary School in New York State. Hearing this, Carol's heart skipped a beat and he immediately denied it in a hurry. How is that possible? I was in the United States at the time and was determined to protect the personal safety of my classmates. The black guns of unknown origin will be sold in the toilet. Help. Poor, unemployed old teachers buy medicine for free. Organized students to buy prescription cold medicines to make psychotropic drugs. I have also helped some students who were bullied to seek justice. Karl made one last effort, and Grindelwald seemed to appreciate it as he nodded. I can't deny that you are helping your students, but your methods seem a bit excessive. You used a fully insured truck to hit a bully and left him with permanent disability, and you also defrauded the insurance money, right? Karl said somewhat evasively. To each his own, to each his own. But having said that, his tone was not as tough as before. He quietly looked at the handsome old man in front of him. While feeling a little embarrassed, I began to develop a strong interest in the organization the other party was talking about. After all, being able to travel across the ocean to investigate his past, and it happened in the Muggle world, has to be said to be quite powerful. So, after thinking it over again and again, Karl looked up at the other party and asked solemnly, "Okay. You passed my test, you are a good person, and I'm willing to share my plan with you, but let me make it clear first, the 2 chips you took out earlier must be given to me after I finish speaking." Seeing the other party admit defeat so smoothly, Grindelwald did not mock him, but instead had a smug smile on his face. Controlling the little devil in front of him gave him long lost pleasure. Many years ago, he could also control him easily. Another ambitious and equally handsome and beautiful boy. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at Carol. The handsome boy in front of him was indeed handsome enough and somewhat similar to him, but there was still some difference. Or perhaps, the boy's face illuminated by the sun in the barn, that summer surpassed all the beauty in the world. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.